For the record, just so that folks who might see me checking my phone up here, in one of my capacities at Knox College, my professional life, I actually have an on-duty call rotation, and this happens to be my lucky week. So if any emergencies come in through Knox College, I might have to step away. Just want to let you all know that I'm not doing this on purpose. I'm here, I'm paying attention, but I have to get paid. That's part of my job. So we are already in open session because we stepped out of closed session. So Allison, for the record, if you can just call roll.
Phelps.
Here.
Rodriguez. Here. Sherby.
Here.
Walters.
Here.
Francis.
Here.
Hannigan.
Here.
Lyon.
Yes.
Okay, now if we can all stand for a moment of silence and the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so we're going to start with the recognition of visitors. We have a few comments from the public. I will call you up in order that I've received your registration form. Request that you, visitors can request to speak to the board on any item germane to the business, the role and the function of the board. I will call you up, go ahead and give your name and you can begin your statements. I've noticed that some people are still, there used to be an old policy that you had to include your address. You don't have to do that. So
that will be affected that way. I feel it's unfair to those parents and to those students that they're going to be so far away from their home. I know that changes have to come, but I feel like we as parents weren't given a lot of options. If there were more than one option that didn't work, where's those numbers, those proof? What other plans have been thought of? I know that it's not been voted on yet, but there's only one proposed set of boundaries. So how is there anything to compare it to? The children, there's nothing to compare it to us. If you guys have, had it given to you, I feel like as parents that are being affected by it, we should be allowed the access to that kind of information too. My children have names. They don't, their school is home for them. I feel like our children are kind of like just pawns and being used as dollar signs. If the school boundaries are being based off of making it more equality for the town, then why don't we do something like grade centers where it's not like this group, this group, this group. I feel like we haven't been given fair options for boundaries. I know other parents that are going to, either move out of the school district or move their children at least out of the school district. I just feel like we should be offered more options or at least shown the proof that other options didn't work. I'm going to have 3 different children at 3 different schools at 3 different ends of town. How am I going to get them all to school at the same time, pick up at the same time? I'm worried about my son who's 10, who will be going to Lombard. I use the PALS program. Are they going to offer that there? Because he's only going to be 10. He's not going to be able to come home, walk who knows how far from a bus stop, and be at home by himself because he's not old enough. And I just want to make sure that all options are being looked at and that, all thoughts are being, like with the PALS and things, that it's being taken into consideration. Thank you.
thank you. Next we have Julie Watson talking about dual credit.
Hi, I'm Julie Watson. Probably on a very different topic than everybody's brains are going right now. I'd like to talk to you about dual credit. Until last year, when this subject became important to my family, I was pretty much completely oblivious to what the district's policy about dual credit and the hindrance it was creating in the prosperity of our students. I know there has been countless other parents before me who have worked tirelessly to change the district's policy in the past without success. But I truly did not understand what it meant to a student until it was my daughter that started high school with huge aspirations to graduate high school with a diploma as well as an associate's degree from Carl Sandburg. Abingdon was doing it with great success, so I figured it should be easily obtainable for someone in District 205 as well, since Carl Sandburg was so accessible to us. I unfortunately found out that I was wrong. My daughter Becca is a junior at GHS. She's a 4.0 student. She's 5th in her class. She's taking 10 semester hours at Carl Sandburg now, taking AP Calculus and Spanish 3 at GHS. We heard there was a new law going into effect January of 2019 that was created by our district senator and passed by the state legislature to ensure that there was equal access and credit available for all Illinois students to obtain dual credit. She was really excited. As before this law went into effect, she could only get dual credit from District 205 per policy for 8 classes, which only gives her 4 credits, because you get a half of a credit per Sandburg for high school. This law was sponsored by Senator Weaver, and I've personally spoken with his office many times since I found out about the law so that I was able to speak to it, understand the intent. The intent of this law was to allow students to get an unlimited amount of dual credits, as long as these courses met the educational guidelines of the district. This law would not change the fact that our district gives a half of a credit for every 3 credit ratio, but it would allow all dual credit, meaning taken all in the summer, taken in the evening, taken year-round, to count for high school credit as well as college credit. And I even spoke with Carl Sandburg, who was very engaged in making this happen for any high school student that was willing and able to take college-level classes. So Becca made a plan. She would take summer classes, she would take classes during the school year, obtain enough credits to graduate with an associate's degree at the same time as obtaining her diploma for GHS. She was motivated to challenge herself as well as significantly reduce the amount of student debt that she'd be graduating with her bachelor's degree. I feel like for a 15-year-old girl, this is pretty amazing to have these dreams and fortitude and forward thinking. We were very proud of her and blessed that the law came into effect when it did. Like I mentioned before, Abingdon has already has a program to help their students get the associate's degree. So we felt like the law would help us to make, even though District 205 doesn't have that same path, at least she'd be able to do that herself. So while planning for her classes for the next 2 years, I contacted and met with Dr. Asplin and Tiffany Springer in March to find out how the district policy was going to change in light of the law that went into effect January 1st. I received an email about a month after our meeting, and this is what it said, and I quote, "Our attorney's analysis determined that the Dual Credit Quality Act requires community college districts to offer dual credit courses when requested by a school district and to give student college credit for the courses that comply with criteria established in the Act, but does not require school districts, high school districts, to offer dual credit or give high school credit for college-level courses." I have to say I was completely shocked and saddened by this reply. The interpretation by our district's attorney can't be any more different than the intent of the law. It's taken me 8 months to come here and decide to speak with you. Becca won't be able to graduate with an associate's degree because of the way that the District 205 is interpreting this law. And I realize that whatever I say tonight will not fix this long-standing problem with the district in order to benefit. I don't have any more children, but I decided that if I didn't speak up, the students behind her that maybe don't have the parents to support them will also suffer. This has to be changed. Our district is not only significantly behind the rest of the country, but we are behind all the districts close to us that offer many dual credit courses within their schools and without limitations on how many dual credits they will allow for graduation. So I am here to beg each of you on the board to read the Dual Credit Quality Act that went into effect January 1st. speak with Senator Weaver regarding the intent of this act, reach out to ROVA, Abington, United, West Central, and any other district in our area that are helping students go beyond what can be offered by their district alone. Their students, despite being in a much smaller district, actually have more opportunities for academic growth than our students do in District 205. I hope that once you read and understand the intent, that you will look to change the district's policy and allow for unlimited dual credit hours towards graduation. Figure out why our district is so unwilling to change this policy. I would be more than happy to explain how this has affected my daughter, how she will incur almost $30,000 additional in student loans because she cannot complete her associate's degree. I am willing to be a part of the solution by acknowledging this problem. I'm willing to actively participate in removing any barriers that may be standing in the way of our district fixing the dual credit policy. But this has been going on for a long time, and we really need to get to the bottom of it, and we need to change it for our students. Thank you.
Next up, we have Elizabeth Ahi, speaking on the proposed boundary changes.
Thank you, President Cervantes. My name is Elizabeth Ahi. I have 3 children. Holden is 10 and Mia is 7. They are in the 4th and 1st grades at Silas, and I have Cora, who is 2, not yet in school. And I would like to begin first by acknowledging the hard work and dedication of the board and the administration in this district. I do understand you're public servants, and that the work you do is largely unseen and often heavily criticized. So I do want to take a moment to say that I deeply appreciate your service to our community and the work you do on behalf of the children of this district. I am here to speak of how my children and my family would be directly affected by the proposed K-4 boundaries. My main concerns are those of logistics, community, and how these boundaries were initially decided. My children currently attend Silas Willard, but my home is among the 20% of the current Silas boundaries slated to be moved to Steele next year. One of my biggest concerns with this situation is one of logistics. My home is less than 1 mile away from Silas, but more than 2.5 times that distance from Steele. I am concerned about the amount of time my child will be required to spend on a bus every day to commute, or alternatively, the additional miles of wear and tear I would have to put on my vehicle. These are not insignificant amounts of time or distance when you consider that I can currently be at my children's school from my house in 3 to 5 minutes, depending on traffic. And Silas is a part of my immediate neighborhood, not including picking up or dropping off my children today. I drove past Silas 3 times, including on my way here tonight. My next concern is about community. My daughter, who would still be in elementary school next year, is happy, stable, and thriving at Silas, a school community she has been a part of before she even arrived as a kindergartner last year. Because of her older brother, many of the teachers and staff already knew her, and so many of the friends she made in preschool were there. The familiar faces everywhere made the transition to elementary school as seamless as possible for my anxious and very introverted child. With such a very small percentage of the Silas boundary being set to move to Steele, my daughter would be forced to leave nearly every friend and familiar face she has ever known, despite the fact that she has not moved homes, nor is her school closing next year. It was stated in a boundary discussion last month that the board does not want there to be neighborhood schools, and yet by keeping 80% of the current Silas students at Silas next year, these proposed boundaries have created a de facto neighborhood school, just not one my children can attend. Finally, I would like to address how these proposed boundaries were brought to the school board for consideration. In September, the discussion about the issue was that 3 separate boundary plans would be presented at the October board meeting for review. I held off on contacting anyone at that time to express my concerns because I wanted to wait and see what those plans would look like. I was incredibly dismayed in October when only one single plan was presented to the board. Although it was stated in the discussion that no other plan could work, those other plans were not even presented to the board for consideration. What did those other plans look like? Why wouldn't they have worked? Can the board see them? Can the public see them? In conclusion, I want to remind the members of the board that you hold a considerable amount of power over the lives of many residents in this community, and that you hold the power to significantly disrupt the daily life of my family for the next 8 to 10 years. And although I have many more concerns and many more questions than I could possibly include in my comments tonight, I ask that you take the time to consider my concerns and those of other speakers tonight. I urge you to take some additional time to hear from your constituents and to make your final decisions about the boundaries, mindfully and with empathy toward everyone involved. I thank you very much for your time and consideration in this matter and for allowing me to speak tonight.
Thank you. Next, we have comments from Heather Barker, again regarding boundaries.
I'm Heather Barker, and I currently have 2 children attending Silas Willard. One in 1st grade and one in 3rd grade. As the proposed boundaries are set, it would be forcing my children out of their home school that they have grown to know and love and are comfortable with and are thriving at, and dump them in a school that is foreign territory. It would have been my oldest son's last year at Silas with all of his friends, and they get to stay, and he gets to be away from them, now with these drawn lines. My question is, how are you going to ease the transition for these children that are being forced to move? Do you have a system in place where they can have familiar faces in each classroom? These children matter and are not just a dollar sign. They have names. You have 89 students coming from Silas. 89 students that have names. 63 students from Steele that have names. I believe that is what I recall. You could help the transition process for these incoming students who don't know anyone. You could help the transition process as they're all nervous and they're all scared. They know nobody, know none of the teachers, don't know any of those students that are already there, that have friends, that have been established. As for the boundary line, where is the proof that these other plans that you said you were going to work on didn't work? Besides your word, where are the crunched numbers? Where are the numbers that you said that you worked on? I am 0.6 miles, 1 block from the boundary lines that you worked on from Silas. I'm 2.3 miles from Steele School, meaning you will have to add a bus stop in my neighborhood. This is a huge safety concern of mine as I live around very busy streets. I also live around very drug area. And I don't see any bus stops or bus routes on this proposed boundary lines. And I know you are working on that. I do urge you to not approve anything until you have everything accounted for and you can ensure the safety of all the children that you're going to move. Also, why wasn't this made more public? I have talked to many families who had no knowledge that they were going to be moving to Steele School. I know you posted the boundary lines in the schools, but a lot of families don't go to the schools and pick up their children. They use the pickup lines. Why weren't emails sent out with the new proposed boundaries? Why couldn't it have been made more public? Why I feel like everything was just a hush-hush? Thank you.
Thank you. Apologies. There will be a discussion later about boundaries for those individuals who are interested in making comments. I hesitate to start that conversation now as we are entering in other portions, presentations to the board, and want to keep on that schedule. So I don't want to leave those comments hanging, but we will have a boundary discussion later during this meeting. So next, we do have presentations to the board. First up, student council representative.
Okay, so hi, my name is Dakara. I'm the corresponding secretary of the GHS Student Council. We had a haunted high school on October 30th at GHS, and we had 702 kids attend. Coloring contest winners were, they received prizes from Dick Blick, and we had members of the council go out to the schools in which kids won and deliver them. We also had a Veterans Day breakfast on November 8th at the GHS North cafeteria, and we had breakfast pizza and muffins, and the drumline did a send-off for the veterans. At our last meeting, we actually voted on the swirl theme, which will be Emerald City, and that date will be February 15th of 2020. And then we will begin the process of voting for Spirit Days as probably at our next meeting. That's it.
Any questions for student council rep?
Thank you for being here.
Next, we have the presentation by Courtney Knuth regarding school-based health centers.
Hello, I'm Courtney Knuth, and I'm the health services coordinator for the school district. And go ahead and
Good evening. I'm Michelle Gabriel. I'm the Public Health Administrator and CEO for the Knox County Health Department, Knox Community Health Center.
Michelle and I, we've had a couple meetings, and we're really excited to propose a plan to.
I'll keep your mics on.
There we go.
Is this better? Story of my life. Were you able to hear our names?
Yeah.
Okay. So Michelle and I, we've had a couple meetings together, and we're both very excited to propose a plan for a school-based health center that would be located at the 7th through 12th grade building, and effective January of 2022. And we do have, let me first start out giving you some handouts so you can kind of refer to them. The first one is a packet. Thank you. The first one is a packet that just kind of gives an overall summary of school-based health centers, some of the services they provide, and not only the educational issues, but also the community issues that they help address as well. Another form that I should have given Michelle is just a map of Illinois and the school-based health centers. They're very prominent in Chicago, but they're really starting to become on the rise in rural communities and kind of getting closer to home. Peoria is the one closest to here. But the need for them has been made known, and so I'll give that map to you guys as well. And then the other one is also the outline of kind of what Michelle and I have put together of our plan on how to roll out the school-based health center over the next couple of years. That I'll go over here. Thanks, Michelle. So starting with our overall goal, we would like to open in January of 2022, provide medical, dental, and mental health services, decrease student absenteeism, increase graduation rates, and overall improve health and well-being of all students and staff. We would serve all students and staff of Galesburg School District. And we would be open during school hours and maybe even in the summer as well to provide some services that may be needed to start off the school year. Some of the services that we hope to provide would be medical, of course, including chronic disease management, STIs, family planning, medication management, lab tests, physicals, and vaccinations. Physicals and vaccinations, that would be for physicals, especially for students and staff. Just a couple other things of incidents are, staff members who maybe had a needle exposure or something like that need follow-up care. They would be able to provide guidance and services for those as well. We'd also provide dental. Michelle and I are hoping for 2 dental hygienists and a part-time dentist and 2 mental health counselors and psychiatric services as well. 2 of the main things in the pre-planning stage for this school year, Michelle and I, we do have an understanding of school-based health systems or school-based health centers, but we really want to further that education, and we want to continue to do more site visits, and that's going to be a big goal of ours this year. Another one is going to be the data collection. The Knox County Health Department, they do a community needs assessment that they will conduct, and I will aid in data with the school district as far as absenteeism, current dropout rates, office visits from the nurses, and any nursing referrals as well. Because, although, other school systems have put this in place, we really want to see our numbers and we really want to be able to measure our success as well. A community advisory committee is going to be another huge part of this school year, and we really want to, even though this is going to be based in a school setting, it's really going to be a community involvement. We want to get out there, we want to include as many community members as possible, as well as parents and students, and get them on the committee so we can know what we need to serve and how to do that. As far as the site, I have spoken with Dr. Aslan and Jen Ham, and we were thinking the current GHS North location, we would use that as it has an external door and parking lot as well. And I kind of went over the dimensions that are neat that Michelle and I have kind of ran through, and that space would be adequate. We would staff, the health department would be staffing a family nurse practitioner, 2 counselors or licensed clinical social workers, psychiatrists, 2 dental hygienists, and a medical assistant as well to help with the front desk and aid the nurse practitioner. So the pre-planning stage, of course, feel free to just ask questions as I go through this, but know if we do not have the answers, as we're still kind of learning ourselves in the introductory phase, I will write them down and I will find them out for you guys. For the following school year, 2020-2021, that's our planning stage. And that's when we're really going to be developing our model, where the committee will be getting together, we're going to be having a lot of meetings, and we're really going to be creating a plan for funding and getting ready for that launch phase. And Michelle will be able to speak with a little bit about the funding. As the health department, they're going to be the main one driving the staffing and the operational funds for that via grants. And if you know anything else you want to, in other avenues, yeah. She threw out different models that I'm unfamiliar with that she may be able to talk more about if you have any questions. And then, of course, the launch stage in 2021, 2022 would be when we would want to open up, finalize things. We would have to work closely with Illinois Department of Public Health, which Michelle has already reached out to them just as guidance, getting the administrative code and things that we need on that end. And then hopefully getting ready to go in January 2020. Trying to think. Are there any questions right now? Yes.
On this map,
Yes.
this would be a funded school health center or a non-funded school health center? Where do we fall in your proposal, Michelle? What's the difference? Someone's funding it.
There's several models.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There are a variety of models for school-based health centers, but I'm trying to think. This is the funded. I think that that, we would fall under the funded school health center, because the Knox County Health Department would be the provider. There are some school-based health centers where they provide the majority of the funding, and it's based on grant. And so staff members, they never know really if it's going to continue or not year to year.
There's several models of school-based health centers. For example, right now the health center is operated by the health department. It's what's called a Section 330 funded community health center. So it's federally funded, and it operates the health center at the health department. Occasionally, school-based health centers have been funded by the state. So the state, I believe, of Illinois does fund some school-based health centers, but it depends on if money becomes available and if money's available to add new sites or not. So we would run the school-based health center as part of our existing clinic. And there are different ways we could fund it. We could leave it as not, for lack of a better word, I'm going to throw some terminology around. I apologize in advance, but we could leave it outside of our scope and operate it as a look-alike or as a fee-for-service clinic until a new application comes out, which would then allow us to bring it into our scope. But if we did that, it would also bring with it money. So it would bring federal dollars to the clinic. So if I operate the clinic outside of our scope and wait for a new access point, then the potential is there to write for an additional $650,000 to run the clinic. So that's one option. And we could also operate as what's called a look-alike, where I file a large amount of paperwork, but it would allow us to bill Medicaid for the same rates that we get at the community health center at the health department, which is they call it an encounter rate. So we basically get paid the same amount of money for every patient we see, regardless of what we do for them. So there are other models out there. There's state-funded models. There's some that are, I'm sure, funded by other grant-based services or private services and foundations. So some of those that are unfunded may be funded by a private foundation. But primarily the ones I'm familiar with are more through the FQHC model or the school-based health center models.
So the biggest demand upon the school district would be the space, correct?
Correct, yeah. A lot of it as well for the registration, getting parental consent and being involved in the community, getting it out there, not just with Michelle and I, but also the staff members of the school-based health center. That the site visits that I had went on, that seemed to be the biggest hurdle was the initial consents and getting the parental permission for students to access the school-based health center.
That is a huge part of it, is getting that consent and getting the parents involved and educated about what it does. The intent is not to supplant any existing services you have. They don't take over for the school nurses. They don't take over any programs that are out there. They don't even necessarily supplant the child's primary care provider. They're there as a tool to assist in taking care of the child. Now, if the child does not have a primary care provider, they're in a different area. The intent behind something like that is not to come in and take over and to push everything else out. It's to come in and be part of it. And there really are truly unique models of care, if you've ever seen one.
Is this a clinic that we're opening at GHS North? What kind of hours are you going to be keeping?
It would be an actual clinic, so there would be a nurse practitioner there to see patients. There would be dental services there. There would be behavioral health services there, and I believe the school is talking about it being limited to staff and students, so it would be open during school hours only. Am I correct? It was never the intent to open it to the community.
If it's open to all students, what's the proposal on getting students from remote locations to that facility for the services?
That was one thing that Michelle and I talked about. Did you ever get a hold of it?
I have not, no. We're looking at what other sites do.
Yeah, that's something that we're looking into because we both brought that up. And there's going to have to be some sort of transportation. We don't know if that would be something that the school district would have to provide. I don't know if that would be first choice. I don't know how legally that would work if an outside entity would be transporting students that are technically in school attendance at that time. So we're trying to work on that.
There's also the opportunity, there's more and more teleservices out there. And so I think we could realistically, depending on the service, look at what could be done from site to site with telepsych. It started in telepsych with telemedicine equipment. Because we're an FQHC model, we can bill for both sides of that service. So if I send an individual over to another school and they complete 3 or 4 visits, I can bill for both sides of it and take care of that. So there's a lot of those models out there. They even do a little bit of it for dentistry, believe it or not, like the exam portion of it when a hygienist will complete a cleaning. Some of the exam portions with dentists can even be done via tele.
So looking at that model, would those sites need additional space, equipment, for those services to take place?
Probably very limited. Yeah, I think it would just be a private room. As far as the computer system, that would be the traveling piece. That wouldn't be stationed at every school. So I think it would just be a private room for that to occur in.
I've also heard about state money, federal money. Is there local money involved in the establishment of this clinic?
I'm sure there could be. We've used very limited local dollars, mostly for like pieces of our clinic, like programs, and as it's developed over time. Our clinic started as a free clinic, moved into a rural health clinic, so over the course of years, there's been a lot of local volunteers and hours put in there. So I would assume at some point there could be some looking around for local dollars, especially in the initial startup.
Like how much?
I have not put together a budget yet. But primarily, you're looking at staffing and equipment, and I don't even want to guess. I don't want to guess. I was trying to come up with a number for you, but I don't even want to guess.
Any other questions? So then, this is a presentation to the board, so are we being asked to provide any direction, support, go forward? What would you like from us?
This is our first, time introducing this to you guys, so what I would like from you guys is to review information, the handouts that we gave you, kind of think on this, feel free to discuss, and I'm, Michelle and I are happy to come back, and, we hope for this to be something that we can move forward with. She has a board meeting at the health department this week, and she's wanting to discuss that with her board as well. We wanted to start here, of course, and but we are excited about this, and we'll probably be seeing more of you, I hope.
I'm excited about the possibility.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next, we have a presentation on the 5-6 curriculum.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. I come today representing a large committee of people that put a lot of hours and work into this. So I certainly want to recognize all the members that put their time into this as they're listed there. You have a combination of staff, parents, community members, board member, curriculum director, principals, which also includes student feedback as we went out and talked to students and survey results. They may have not been there every day, but they certainly had a voice. Our charge was to develop a 5th and 6th grade schedule and present our recommendations to Dr. Aspel, and then you, the 205 Board of Education. That's what I'm here to do tonight. We had several methods. This is not all-inclusive of everything we did, but we had some guiding questions that we developed to kind of push our charge through and explore what was best for our kids in a 5th and 6th grade building. You can see the questions there, some very in-depth questions like instructional minutes, because there's certainly been our recommendation as a change in that, all the way down to simple things. Do we want them to pass from class to class? We had discussions about lockers and locks and PE changing and just, you name it, we talked about it. And we'll continue to have those discussions. We elicited feedback. Our main way was through surveys, but also going out to the community. One of our members worked for the public library, so she was a valuable resource for us. Parent feedback. I have some survey results from you from our initial survey, the one that we used. You can see that the majority of our respondents, of 346, 75% of those were parents. I'll go through these slowly so you have time to digest them. You had some humor there, someone put in helicopter parent, I think.
I appreciate that.
We wanted to know, strictly from feedback from the community and parents, what was an ideal course to them for core instruction. This one was split anywhere from 40 to 60 minutes was the popular opinion. How about electives? This one had a little more of a broad span there with 40% to 40 to 45 minutes for that. How about an ideal advisory homeroom course in minutes? Again, kind of a wide range there, anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes. How many electives should a student have? I know there was in initial discussions we wanted students to have more opportunities. I would say that this survey would indicate we currently offer 1 at the middle school. This indicates 2. And then how important or how much do you value certain electives outside the core instruction? This would be on a 4-point scale. So you can see, and then the ones in yellow are the ones that we're recommending that we offer. The ones in green, the lime green there, are ones that we feel we can pick up in other courses that we're also offering. So there's those. Our current course offerings and what we're proposing we offer are the same: English language arts, math, social studies, science, 2 elective periods. We'd like every student to have the opportunity to have PE and/or health class every day, and obviously we want lunch. So we get down to electives, and we had a long discussion on electives, and we felt like this should be a time of discovery for our 5th and 6th graders before they got into the 7 and 12 complex, where they kind of start having more of that targeted instruction and targeted path of the way they want to go. So you have opportunities there for every 5th and 6th grader, band, choir, your traditional ones, art. We felt like every 5th grader should be exposed to keyboarding. So we have that piece. It's not so much an elective. It's going to be like kind of a chosen elective for you, but it's just a small semester that's included with a Genius Hour, which has been very popular amongst middle school students. I know Mr. Hawkins did a presentation a while back about students that love that because it's something that they can choose to study on. It's something that they are passionate about and they can push forward. We felt like currently our keyboarding class is 7 weeks, and that's just about perfect in length. To have a semester keyboarding class could be a little redundant for them. So we wanted to combine that with something. So we thought the Genius Hour piece and our discussions and feedback from kids was a valuable thing. Also, the push towards STEAM, which is often known as STEM, but STEAM with that A is the art piece. So science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics, and combining those things to push kids to be more collaborative, to be more creative, building with their hands. I looked at some career choices for kiddos in the long run, and it kind of matches up with a lot what we're doing with our high school program with the CTE program. So we wanted to have that baseline for those kiddos as well. Animators, civil engineers, pilots, web design, a lot of things came out of that. So I think it's just a great opportunity for our kiddos in the 5th and 6th grade. Also, I know a big robotics push currently going on in the elementary, so to kind of continue that momentum. And then we had this idea that we came up with, which was the Zephyr Hour. We didn't want to call it a steady skills course because it just seemed like a lame name for it, so we came up with Zephyr Hour. And this is an opportunity where kids that need help can get help. Kids that need enrichment and want to be pushed, they can go there and be pushed. Organizational skills, things like that, they have that option. And this would be something that we want to make available to our parents and families if they feel the need where your kid just needs that little more individualized education. This would be a great place for that. So those are options in both 5th and 6th grade. The unique thing about the electives, we based them on semesters. So if you wanted to take a semester of art and you loved it and you want to take another semester, you can. There's no limit to what you can do. It just doesn't mean you can only take art one time. So you can take that multiple times. Band and choir, I will tell you that Cyrus White and Andy Impey were integral in developing this. They wanted kids to have the opportunity to explore multiple things. They didn't want them just to be tied to band and or choir. So they chose to have band and choir share the same period so kids could get exposure to both while also using their second elective to explore other things within there. I think that's just valuable, and ultimately we want to get kids to exposed to as many things as possible to see what they love and what their passion is. I think we've been able to do that within this schedule. The proposed schedule that we came up with, and this is just the one we ended up with, we had, I wouldn't call them arguments, I would call them friendly debates on many different schedules. We went through 7 different schedules. This was the one we ended up with. It's an 8-9 period day if you count lunch. All periods, core and electives, are 50 minutes long. This is an increase. You could look at this and say, this is an increase in some classes like science, social studies, your current electives. And you could also look at it and say, well, this is a decrease in 84 minutes from reading instruction. What we discussed was not necessarily the quantity of minutes, but the quality of minutes. And that is the focus for us currently and going forward in this 5-6 building and complex is how are we going to carry out instruction that's best for kids? And are we doing things the right way? Are we doing the right things that impact kids in the right direction? So I know that was some feedback that we had gotten from the community. You'll notice a little caveat down there with the delayed start. We're just proposing that you would not have homeroom that day, and then the periods obviously would get a little shorter to accommodate that. Then we also said there's no way that this committee could ever come up with every scenario and decide everything for a building that some of us may not even work in. So we didn't feel like that was right for us to come up with ideas. So we had some recommendations, and again, this isn't all-inclusive of everything, but it was some ideas for the building staff or whoever is in that building to carry on and take forward and have those discussions prior to the start of 5th and 6th grade. So that will be my presentation. I'm sure there's questions, so I'll be glad to do as best I can.
Questions?
How does this differ from the curriculum that we have right now?
Currently, in the middle schools, one big difference is, like I said, the instructional minutes. We have 86-minute block period. What I will tell you with the block period, specifically with our 6th grade students, it is a struggle. It's tough to sit that long. I've noticed in the 4 years we've done that, our classroom disruptions have skyrocketed. So that's one big difference. Obviously, having PE every day would be a change for our elementary kiddos. We're going to be a lot bigger of a building, student-wise as well. So a lot of moving parts. And obviously, there's the opportunity to have more electives in the big.
Just to interject, I think the science and social studies piece will be more focused as well, so you'll have more reading across the curriculum, whereas you may not have that elongated ELA block, but you'll be reading across the curriculum where that nonfiction piece is extremely important. I'll have that exposure to science and social studies with more conceptual understanding.
Right. Oftentimes there's this misconception that reading is only taught in English language arts, and we're trying to prove that is not always the case.
Well, I do have concerns with that. You're extending the length of the school day by quite a bit. It's, I think, 47 minutes longer than what 5th graders currently going to. But you're reducing the amount of reading. And with our reading scores, we're just reading and math scores. This doesn't seem like it particularly addresses how we're going to improve that. We're actually reducing. I think we just asked to have 90 minutes of reading for a fifth grader.
Right.
And now we're reducing it.
Again,
So that we can offer them art and STEM and.
Sure. I think it gets back to that piece, but you just don't teach reading in ELA. And we're just not addressing the reading scores in ELA or the math scores. I think having some of those extra classes, the STEAM, the Zephyr, how we can continue to put people in places where those kids can get help. The other thing that the schedule allows you to do that we're having a tough time right now doing, specifically at the middle school levels at MTSS and our RTI process, where you're helping those kids that are struggling and offering them an opportunity to get better, or enriching those kids to push them further. We currently don't have the resources to do that as we stand.
Well, half of these kids are middle school kids, will be fifth graders.
Right.
So this is going to be a market difference.
Sure. I don't disagree. It's going to be a little bit of a change, but certainly we feel like, again, going back to that quality piece of what we offer and how we offer it is more important than the amount of time we're offering. What we're doing right now, you know, that isn't working.
Right.
Our math and reading scores are nowhere near where they need to be. That's obvious. So
well, as it is now, we have a rotation, I believe, with specials where a fifth grader rotates through, so they get the exposure to art and music and choir. They have these different exposures, but to fully commit to 2 electives, that's a substantial amount of your educational period that you're devoting to potentially art or choir.
I think one of the things to keep in mind too, though, is that connected piece to school, where I need to feel connected. I need to find something I'm passionate about. And I can actually, if I want to take a band or choir class, I'm actually integrating my mathematical knowledge, and actually they're reinforcing it through quarter notes, 16th notes, things like that. I do understand your concern about the ELA piece, but the 90 minutes of reading and writing is across the curriculum this year. It's not necessarily just 90 minutes of reading. So we're doing that across the curriculum. So that includes science and social studies. We can't allow the students to see reading in just reading class. We have to have them connect those strategies into other content areas. And that's one of the focuses that we're trying to put in place. And also, from the teaching perspective, if I'm teaching science all day long versus teaching multiple subjects, I can probably focus my efforts on that in an even greater capacity. So that also would be more of a wheelhouse for a teacher to then be able to have that maintained consistency across the grade level.
One more thing, Mr. Sherman. With the electives, I know that was a long discussion we had about the length of those. Offering 2, do you really
100 minutes of electives?
Right, did you really want to lock in a student into a year-long elective? That's why we kind of opted for the semester, so kids could explore different electives. An opportunity. But I understand too.
And how they get to choose these electives? Is the fifth grader coming in going to say, I want to?
So our current method works pretty well. I don't think we'll vary from that too much. We have for our fine arts coordinator, Russ Rob, I think he's here, helps us with this. But kids take sheets home. They come to an electives assembly and they see what these classes are about prior to. They get to choose their preference, them and their family members, and then that's how we fill the courses. Ultimately, we run into times when those courses fill up. And then with the semester option, you'll be able to come back through second semester and offer that course. So everybody gets.
So is the first come, first serve, or some aptitude, or
maybe when you take it, not necessarily if you get it. So
because I think one of my concerns would be that you offer these electives, and I know I probably would have just taken art, because doing art is probably a lot easier than doing math for 50 minutes.
Depends on the person.
Yeah. Well, at least, depending on the person. What happens if you get all your students are wanting to do, music and band and choir, and they're not wanting to do the STEM or I forget which other
Well, that would be a discussion we have to have, adding sections of that. Currently, our music staff, I know, does a phenomenal job. We're sharing them as is, and they're planning to come down, I think, in the 5-6. So we're going to have a wide variety of staff. I think we can accommodate that.
When are you planning to implement these changes?
I think the idea is that the 5th and 6th grade building would start at next school year, so we would need to be prepared.
And what has the faculty said about these changes?
They were part of the faculty representation that we had. Those people would go back to their staffs and get feedback, and that's kind of how we ended up where we are. So they
seem to be very much in favor.
This is where we're at. I would say the majority of them are in favor of this, where we currently are.
I would say
to members Sherpy and Mr. Hunnigan, I was able to attend probably 3/4 of these meetings. These weren't easy decisions. I will say Nick's being very nice when he said they were agreeable discussions. There was a lot of thought, and I think what you're seeing here, the same things you were addressed of how are we going to get our reading and writing in there. Keyboarding was brought up, that, these kids are going into the future and they need to know how to keyboard. And so none of this was taken lightly, and these meetings went long sometimes. And I will say all the faculty involved vetted all this at their schools, and then came back with, there was one meeting where I thought we were going to have to separate a couple individuals because of their conviction to what they believed in and what they felt they needed. But at the end of this, I think what you're seeing is a very doable and a very thought out process. And I have a very good appreciation for our staff and our administration. They had to get this down to the minutes. This wasn't hey, we'll just cut here and move. It's a well orchestrated situation. So I agree with you totally, but I think what they've got here, it opened my eyes to how our schools run day to day, and what we are trying to teach the kiddos and how we are getting to them. So, and I will applaud our band and choir people. They came around and said 50 minutes isn't enough for us, but we understand we have to work with everybody. So it was a very mellowed group that I feel very comfortable with what they're presenting here.
For any of these electives, do people need special certificates for teaching them? Are we doing the right staff to teach these classes?
Right, as we move through the staffing, we need to be cognizant of certificates and who's available to teach what. Certainly if you are art course, you're teaching an art course. So.
But what do you need to be a technology teacher?
I believe there's
what do you
different,
teach in technology?
I believe there's different variations of the CTE program. You could have a CTE license. I'm not up to speed so much on the CTE stuff. I'm sure Mr. Houston can speak more to that, but
we do have current staff that hold those certificates.
We currently have a technology teacher as is.
What do they teach?
She teaches basically internet safety, web design. They used to do the keyboarding part until we split that off. Coding.
Stuff that the kids are already doing.
Stuff that they teach us.
And, the reality is that providing an opportunity for supervision of the things that they're already doing on their own in their free time allows us, I think, as a district to help guide them in ethics and behavior and the ability to operate technology, thinking forward beyond the moment in their life where they're posting something really obnoxious on Twitter.
I think the other thing to add to that is specifically how to utilize the Google Suite as well. How do I make a presentation? How can I deliver one successfully? How can I craft a document that's appropriate? Those kind of things as well.
One other comment I'll make is also we have to remember after 6th grade, our students are going to the high school. We're at 7th through 12th attendance center. So we're going to have a culture change that we have to have these kids ready for. And so I think what you're seeing here is going to allow that to happen, especially in 6th grade.
I agree. Thank you for all of the hard work. I like the options that are presented through the electives. I think that is also another form of helping them get ready, right? They're starting to think about where are my interests and what support do I need. So, if I want to do a Zephyr hour because, I really want to take some, opportunity to do something a little bit heavier than what I'm getting in a class, or I need some additional support in another class. I think those are great options. Social emotional activities during those times, depending on what else is being offered, I think there's a lot of opportunity within the schedule.
And we're going to be talking about a lot of these issues later, but in light of our truancy, attendance issues, one of the other highlights we believe most strongly that this format will address a lot more students' interests. Some of these things have been discussed already, but having students show up to school every day is a lot of the battle. And so we feel like this is going to be a major improvement for a lot of our students. And also to directly answer questions, we went through this process yesterday and looked to see that all the teachers that were slotted in these spots were actually certificated in them. I believe I can say everyone. If it isn't everyone, it's almost everyone. I don't remember anybody that was not. So, yeah, so I mean, it's Member Sherky's point about the cutting minutes for reading and math is definitely one we need to consider. I will say that we should probably start doing a better job of front loading some of the research that your brain can only manage so much information in a day. And especially when you're talking about math. Myelin is the sheath around the nerves in your brain, by the way. Yeah. So, medically speaking, there's only so much you can actually comprehend. So, putting in 84 minutes or 89 minutes of math instruction in every day was probably misguided to begin with.
Well, that doesn't necessarily have to be consecutive to be effective. If you chunk it into
Absolutely.
throughout the
Absolutely.
day.
If you chunk it, you can do, but you're going to have to do it right. A lot more practical application. What I feel like this schedule will allow them to incorporate a lot of those skills throughout the day, whether it be in STEAM or it be in band or it be in art. We know a lot more about how the brain operates now than we used to, and the overwhelming research will show you that just what you just said. Doing it across curriculum areas in shorter bursts of time with a lot more frequent checks for how they're doing. I mean, all of those things are incorporated into this schedule. But I don't want to just say, don't worry about that, Member Sherky, we've got it covered. I mean, it is a concern.
I'm really concerned.
And
I see those numbers.
the optics also, without a further investigation of why we made that decision, would be something we would be remiss in not talking about. So I think we need to come back at some point and talk about what are the reasons that we think this is a good reason. I mean, we've talked about them. I think we need to post them too. I mean, I think that this really will improve our students' achievement levels. I think it will also really go after a lot of our attendance issues and really trying to make sure that we get students fired up about staying in school, because those are the ages where we start to see a lot of attendance drop off. And that's going to be a concern. So I think all of the statements that you and all the other members have made, we should not take lightly. I mean, those are very important issues that we need to address, especially if we're taking all the students into one school for the first time ever, at Lombard. So looking at the whole child is going to be a really important concept here for us going forward.
So I want to reiterate something that I heard Nick say, and it's not about quantity, it's about quality. And I think that that's something that as a district we really have to take seriously, because the other thing that I'll say is that what is the quote, the definition of insanity, right, is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And we've been doing this. I don't know how many years have you been on somewhat of a block system?
This is our fifth, I think.
Okay, and we're not seeing the results in 86 minutes of reading or math. So we need to do something different, and we need to look at best practices, and we need to look at research, and we need to look at all of these things that we know as educators to be true, and say, how do we do this better? How do we do this more effectively? And I think that we can do that in a shorter amount of time, and by piquing students' interest. It's personal experience. My son used to love to read until he was told he had only these books that he could read from. And then that went out the door, and that was in 5th grade. And he didn't obtain his love of reading again until he was able to expand beyond that list of books that we said he needed to read. And all of a sudden, there he goes, right? Reading again and reading ferociously. So I think we really need to acknowledge that students learn differently, they have different interests, and whatever engages them is where we have to meet them, because the point is to make sure that they're still there. Thank you. All right, next. A motion to approve the consent agenda. Anyone?
Well, I had a note on the minutes.
Or did you have to?
We have to make the motion first.
I so move.
Okay, now do you have a note about the?
Yeah, in last month's minutes in our boundary study, I used the acronym CEP. I would like the minutes to have it written out, so can we read this about what we talked about? Because I know what it means. What's it stand for, though?
Community Eligibility Program.
I think it should say that. Thank you, Allison.
Any other notes or comments about the items on the consent agenda? Okay. With reflection of that change to the October 14th minutes. Allison?
Rodriguez? Aye. Sherby?
Aye.
Walters?
Aye.
Montez?
Aye.
Hannigan?
Aye.
Lyon?
Yes.
Phelps?
Aye.
All right, moving to focus area number 1, relevant skills that lead to employability. First on that is the administrative report on curriculum. Ms. Springer.
Good evening. We met on Friday for the MTSS committee, November 1st, to discuss our current progress. We also have another meeting this week. The focus for us, as you heard us talk about multi-tiered systems support, that is MTSS. You're welcome. We talked about just the interventions in place that we currently have. Last year was the focus on building a strong tier 1 academic flow chart. So if students are making 80%, if we have 80% of students on grade level, then we do this. It's just an if-then statement. And then this year, if they're not, what do we do? So that's what we're working on, building some strong supports academically and for social emotional learning. We're going to begin reading a book called Champs, A Proactive and Positive Approach to Classroom Management as well. As we see from both the professional development survey and just our observations that students and adults we need to have a common vocabulary about how we deal with classroom management, behaviors that we're experiencing, and how to maximize your instructional minutes with that in place. We also had a school improvement day on October 31st. You have a whole list of all the things that we were able to deliver to staff. We're also continuing to offer after-school training, at least 2 or 3 nights a week. A new calendar will come out in a week or so for the months of December and January for staff to attend some training there as well. We are continuing with our Amplify Science junior high pilot. They are completing 2 units. I just met with them again this evening after school. We are doing kindergarten through 5th grade. We have actually Amplify in kindergarten through 5th grade implemented this year. And so those folks in 6th through 8th grade are trying out Amplify at the middle level to see how they like that. And we're focusing on whether we could go in a discipline-specific route or an integrated model. So discipline-specific would look like 6th grade is physical science, 7th grade is life science, 8th grade is earth science, which is how we currently do that. Whereas the integrated model from NGSS proposes that you integrate and weave all 3 of those on a yearly basis, going back to that myelination. If I'm constantly activating that knowledge of all 3 of those, I'm able to weave ideas in a much less arbitrary way, I guess. It's more thoughtful, and then I can activate that. Because the next time students ever access physical science is 9th grade from 6th grade. So they have this huge span in between, and pulling some of that information is not. Actually, I had Jen Good come from the high school just to take her perspective. She's the department chair there, and she felt that was a concern as well, that we have students that aren't activating that from 3 years prior. So we want to see if we can weave that one thoughtfully. We're also doing a math pilot with 22 teachers across the district, which encompasses around 960 students. Teachers will continue to utilize the program throughout the school year, and we actually have another benchmarking period coming here in December, so we'll see what that progress has looked like from fall to winter. We have another equity leadership meeting. Dr. Paul Gorski, who wrote the book, Reaching and Teaching Students of Poverty, Strategy for Erasing the Opportunity Gap. He will be here with us next week on the 19th for an all-day leadership team meeting. We have members from the community and the schools that are going to join on that day.
Would you go over that again? When are you going to?
On November 19th, and you are welcome to attend if you'd like. It will be from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m.
Where?
Here in Boardroom. Yes. And we actually have been doing a book study along with it. The book that he wrote, we've done the book study. We've had 2 meetings thus far, and I would like to continue the conversation. when he returns. Curriculum leaders met again on November 4th. We met to discuss Ready Math, how that pilot is going, Amplify Science, MTSS, instructional practice around reading, and the guided reading components we're working on this year. We'll be meeting again on December 2nd. And I've gone or participated in 3 recruiting visits to Harris Stowe State University in St. Louis on October 18th. And then last week we went to Illinois State and EIU. Any questions?
Thank you.
All right.
Next, we have the special education report, Dr. Machado.
Good evening. Special education continues to look for staff. We've been conducting interviews with teachers. We do have one new teacher starting in January. We interviewed a second one who hasn't gotten back to us yet, and a third interview was conducted just the other day. We'll be following up with her shortly. She currently attends Eastern Illinois, so it's kind of hard for her to get up here. So we did a phone interview to start. She's going to fill out an application, and then we'll take it to the next step. Paraprofessionals continue to be an issue until they change in veto session, hopefully, how paras get a license. We've had some difficulty. We did conduct 7 interviews. We've only had 1 applicant that we're able to put in for hire based on having the 60 college credit hours. So hopefully we'll get that changed so they can take the para test again, and we can continue to look to get hired people on board to fill our positions. I did interview our psych intern that we have this year for a position for next year. He had to verify with his university when is he able to accept a position for the next year. So he's currently filling out an application so that he can accept with us. So that'll bring us up to 2 psychs for next year. A lot of time has been spent on looking at our current special education students to look where they would fall within the boundary changes next year, looking at the models and where they would be so that we could project our staffing for next year. So we did get that done so we could meet it for yesterday's meeting. We came out on the Illinois State Board of Education hot list for, I know I put DLM in there, Dynamic Learning Maps. Dynamic Learning Maps is the alternative assessment to the IAR, the Illinois Assessment of Readiness. The state projects and the federal government projects that about 1% of your population should only be taking this DLM test. Last year we were at 1.3. 2 years ago we were at 1.1. This year we're at 1.3. So I have to fill out this long form as to why we're at 1.3. The state average last year was 1.15. So we were kind of right on the last few years. But they've added the 9th and 10th graders to testing. And so adding those and the increase of students on the spectrum, low functioning, nonverbal, has really kind of hit our IA DLM numbers. But I'll work on that report for Dr. Asplund.
Questions? Next, we review the building reports. Are there any questions from board members regarding the building reports submitted? The only comment I'll make, and I didn't have an opportunity to share this with you, Tiffany, I'd just like to see a little bit more consistencies. If we're going to go to quarter reports for disciplinary and now breaking all of that information, I would like some consistency in how each school is reporting, because each school is reporting it differently. Okay. And some of the schools, there's not an accurate way for us as board members to note what percentage of demographics are represented in discipline. And that's the important part that we need. I know nobody likes to talk about that, but I need to know. What is the demographic of a particular population in your school, and how many of discipline reports are of a particular demographic? Because the whole point is for us to know if there is overrepresentation among any. And so some of the reports aren't actually reflecting that. So some are. And I just think it's about tweaking and making sure that the folks are aware of that. Okay. Next up, truancy discussion, Dr. Asplund.
Thank you. next month, hoping that, although the turnaround's really fast, so next month we are going to be presenting on the school report card data, but in light of the fact that our truancy, or we'll call it truancy numbers went up so much, I wanted to, highlight one specific reason why that happened. One, the state, bless you, the state has changed its designation of how you report those numbers. It used to be that you only reported unexcused absences, and now that you have to report excused and unexcused absences, those numbers are going to go up for everybody. But I didn't look at everybody, but I just looked at us. But that is a huge change when you're talking about including all absences rather than just unexcused absences. But it is alarming regardless. So before we start formulating a presentation for next month about the school report card, I was hoping to have just a brief outline, understanding what type of data trends do you want us to present, because in fairness, we're not going to present the same data because it's different. So it won't be really easy for us to go back and make those the same. So what type of data do you want us to present so that we can start to make some sort of sense of where we are with absenteeism? Do you want it by building? Do you want it by age? Do you want it by cohort? Do you want it over the last 5 years, 7 years? We're willing to put together whatever. We just would like to kind of have a frame of reference for an understanding of where we'd like these discussions to start.
Well, I think it's important that the data is consistent and accurate to begin with.
Yeah.
So that all the schools have the same definition of what absenteeism is and unexcused. I think that's real important. And we need to make sure that just to confirm that data is accurate. We've had discussions before when parents say, "Oh, my kid was in that high school class, but it was reported as an absentee." We need to make sure that the students there, they're actually there.
Okay.
I also think it's important not just to be collecting data for data's sake, but we should be doing this with a goal in mind, and that's to get kids back in school. So I think we should be looking at why they're not there, whether there's no excuse, no reason whatsoever, which would be the old definition of truant. But I think we should also look at how many of those are sick days, how many of them are, I don't know, whatever the different excuses, doctor's appointments or whatever, stuff like that. I think that's when we can work with that. Everybody has a different reason why the students are in school, and if they're going to get an education, it's important for them to be there and show up to get it.
Right.
All this hard work that everybody's doing doesn't do any good if they don't show up.
Absolutely. Okay.
So that's kind of stuff I see. As whether it's broken down by classroom or I think that's kind of up to you. It's whatever data it's going to need for you to provide us with.
Well, so far then I have established same definition of absent by school, which I can tell you right now, because of the way our schools are oriented, they're not. They are so all the K-5s have the same, and both middle schools have the same. But the middle schools and the K-5s aren't the same. The high school is different to the middle schools, and they're different to the grade schools. So we'll present that. So, and then disaggregate, and then the next thing I wrote down was disaggregate by reason. So let's bring some disaggregated data about why people are missing. Is it illness? Is it truant? Is it college visit? Is it field trip, family vacation?
Whatever. Maybe demographic data might be important too. That might help us to formulate some solutions. If they're special ed students, or if they're students that are have transportation issues with busing, you miss a bus, so they can show up. I don't know. There's a myriad of possibilities of why they're not. We need to find out why.
John, my own feeling is that one of the reasons we may have a truancy problem is because kids are failing in school, and it's hard to go to school if you're not doing well. And I think we also have an unspoken problem in this community of homelessness. And it's kids that don't know where they're going to be sleeping each whether it'll just be each and every night. And I think that has something also to do with. Do we lose school funding when kids don't show up for school?
Not anymore. That used to be true, but last year that changed.
Okay.
We still want to come to school.
We absolutely want them to come to school, but no longer is funding tied to that.
I think, and not to put more work on anyone, but I think that what I would like is for the models to be ran any which way you can, and then for you to bring us trends that are interesting, right? So like, if you were to look at cohort, if you were to look at class, if you were to look at school, and for some reason you see something interesting popping up, I think that bears a discussion. I do agree with Member Hunnigan that there might be something, pulling out students that might have more than one failing grade, and whether or not, it's correlation, not causation. But figuring out on which way that ends, right? Are they failing because they're not coming, or they're not coming because they're failing, right? Mobility is another one. When and we know that this was one of the things that we discussed in moving to 3 elementary schools and then figuring our grade system the way we did, is that we were hoping that reduced the absenteeism based on mobility, because then, you're going to that school regardless of if you move from one neighborhood a block over to another, neighborhood 4 blocks over, the potential for you to end up moving into another school elementary wise is fewer under our new boundary system and our new, the 3 schools. But having everybody at 5-6, everyone having 7-12, right? It's no longer dependent on what community, neighborhood you live in. So I think if you see a trend, I think it's important for us to know. So again, I don't want to put more work on you. But.
Well, no, this is important. I think because we want to be able to present data in a way that we can all discuss it. So, in addition to establish same definition of absence by school, disaggregate by reason, also demographic data, effective homelessness, correlation of failure rates to absences, look for trends and present findings. So, I think that gives me a good idea of where to start. So we have some tools at our disposal to try to find a lot of those answers. And if we find some, we'll let you know what they are, and then we'll talk about strategies to overcome them. Thank you.
Any other last comments on truancy? Okay, moving to focus area number 2, facilities and assistance skill acquisition. We were sent the enrollment report. Is there any questions that members have, or anything that Dr. Esplin would like to comment on?
Only thing is we continue a bit of a descent in our enrollment. It's not as much this month, but obviously a decrease.
We're still doing interviews.
We have been, we definitely attempt to call everybody that moves away. We don't always get to everybody. We definitely get to
All right. Next, building study committees, Dr. Esplin.
Thank you. Really, I just have one brief item. I do have potentially some happy news to report. I found out 4 hours ago that I have been put on the state facilities task force. Sort of. I'm not officially one of the members, but Senator Weaver pulled some strings, and I'm taking his place. So I will be attending the first meeting next Tuesday in Springfield. So those, and I got the email, so I really know very little, but there's going to be 5 meetings, it looks like, and the recommendations have to be done by the end of February. So that facilities task force can then present its findings and recommendations to the General Assembly, who's supposed to then write a bill on how they're going to allocate funding for K-12 construction. So we are making some plans. We've been told unofficially that if you've already started a project, you're probably not going to get money. So that depends on what the definition of started is, and how we divide up what our project is. We've also said that we've heard tale I'll be able to go to the meetings and find out for real. That you're supposed to be shovel ready, and those projects will be much more favorably looked upon. So if we haven't started at the high school, is that kind of shovel ready? Is that kind of started? What if we don't count the pool and the auditorium and the, so it's like there's a lot of ways you can slice this thing up, and we also have an interest in looking at possibly a new GABC building and building a really nice Morton building out there on the north side of the campus, and having some lab space there for our vocational folks. So I will be able to at least be there firsthand to tell you, so I can come back every month now for at least a while and report what we found. So I'll be going next Tuesday, and we'll see what we find out.
Thank you. Next up, do I have a motion to consider approval of the modular quote?
Second.
Ms. Ham.
Okay, in front of you, you have quotes from two modular classroom companies. I had mentioned that we had received initial quotes from one of the companies last month. We had another company reach out to us. These companies aren't readily present in Illinois, so it was nice to have a comparison to be able to see, if we could possibly lease these for less money. The initial company that contacted us, and that was the recommendation of Leggett Architects, was Innovative Modular Solutions, and you'll see the 12-month lease estimate in front of you at $1,276,448. That is inclusive of a dismantling fee that is not to exceed $275,000, but it could be less. So the rest are fixed costs that would be approved as part of the lease.
Questions? Go ahead.
Always have to ask. So there's a huge difference in those modular units for Aries versus Innovative. How can there be almost $380,000 in it? I'm sure you vetted it, but how can there be that much difference?
It's just how they do their pricing. If you look at their overall number at the bottom, there were no general conditions or permits, but they're really only roughly about $100,000 apart. It's just Aries was pricing by the square foot, where Innovative Modular was pricing by the unit. So obviously, delivery fees and installations, Innovative was charging more for that than Aries was. The dismantling fees for Innovative potentially could be more. So you can see that the prices were just spread out in different areas. But at the end of the day, you're only looking at about $100,000 difference. Although with Aries, you wouldn't know what your general conditions costs were or your permits and engineering. Those were billed at time of service, which always makes me nervous because I want to know what worst case scenario is going to be.
How many units are we considering again?
We're considering 4 10-classroom units, so each unit would have 10 classrooms in it.
What about labs? How are we going to deal with labs?
So at this point in time, we're working with Russell Construction. We believe that there's a phasing option where we're most likely going to be able to keep our science wing open, which is where our labs are. So our chemistry and lab classes would be able to be held in those classrooms. And then there are 5 modular classrooms that have sinks and counters for lab spaces. So then we can fit our other science rooms like biology in those classrooms.
And you think they're comparable in quality?
Our science rooms are very large, so they're not going to be as big as our science rooms in some parts of GHS, but they're definitely workable for a year. The other option was to put 3 biology classrooms in Rose Hogan Gym and basically build classroom walls. But when we found out from Innovative Modular that they had these that were used specifically for science rooms, we felt like we might as well use them for what they were intended for, and they have one of these units reserved for us.
So altogether, 40 classrooms.
Altogether, 40 classrooms, yes.
Wasn't one week the library or something? The library. Where was the library going again?
We have yet to determine where the library is going.
Okay.
That is the one thing that we do not have a location for right now.
And in a conversation or email I had from you, so our cost outside of this to bring in water, take out the sewage and bring in whatever, electricity, around 300,000.
About 300,000 is what we had estimated.
And that would be whichever company would still be
Correct.
Yeah, we'd have to bid that one out.
Yes.
We get final designs, so we'll get a fair number on the sewer and power.
So upon, if the board approves this tonight, Lee and I have a conference call scheduled with Innovative Modular to begin that process. Because obviously there will be a great deal of coordination to bring these units in. The other opportunity that we have that I think we'll definitely want to take advantage of is we can actually travel to Elkhart, Indiana, and tour our specific units to make sure they're exactly what we want before they tag them for us, in essence, for next year. So I think that's going to be really important to make sure that these are quality units. We've seen pictures of them, but we actually get to tour them, so that's kind of nice before they are delivered over the summer.
And in terms of, I'm still not convinced our aggressive plan can be done in 1 year, okay? You told us last time you're innovative, it's a month-to-month lease for as much, whatever, it's $32,000 a month.
Correct.
On the other companies, if we went beyond a year, what would their option be? I didn't see. They're innovative contract.
You know what, I would have to go back and look.
But there's flexibility from them as well, on a
Correct.
month-to-month basis.
There was, yes. Yes.
And can I direct a question toward Lee?
Sure.
Lee, you said you worked with Innovative previously. This Aries company, is that someone you're familiar with at all?
Leggett has worked.
Leggett has worked with Innovative.
We have not worked with either company previously. We worked with modular type of buildings before, so I can't speak to the company, but I understand generally how modular buildings go together and how to build to them.
And I think another important thing to point out, I know we pointed out last month, was whether we get super aggressive and get it done in a year, it takes 2 years, we're still going to need the units because we have to get people out of the building. So, whatever we obviously hope you choose the one we recommend. We feel it's cheaper, and we've been told that they have good quality with good references. This doesn't mean that we're absolutely going to stay on 1 year. I mean, we're going to go as fast as we can, but we're still going to have to follow a schedule. But this gives us the flexibility to vacate parts of the building, because otherwise, students would be in harm's way, and it would be appropriate to have them in those spaces.
And we had a phasing conversation today about, it's going to look about maybe moving some design work up so that they can kind of truncate their timeline, so that possibly we could have potentially early bid packages that would go out that would help ensure that really once school's out that we're starting demolition and construction as soon as possible. But they're still kind of vetting through those at this point. At least we'll have some decisions to make on our end.
Yeah, but it was hard for that. Once we finalize what additions we look like, just like we were doing at King, we get structural steel, concrete, demo packages, let release. So that's just like we've done with Silas Willard years ago, or we're doing with King now.
I would like to come and meet with him and give input. So there's a very extensive schedule. They can come, they can talk about their particular curriculum needs, what they envision their classrooms to look like, so that he can definitive design before he presents that to the board. So that's happening on December 9th and 10th. He's also going to convene student groups. We're looking for a date to do that so that we can also get feedback from our students on what they want their environment to look like. So all of that's going to be taking place in December.
In case of an emergency, like a tornado, where would the students go?
We actually have a very large committee that is meeting again on Friday. It's the JHS phasing committee, and there's multiple members on there, but that is one of the items that Mr. Schwartz, our district safety and security director, is looking at and will be part of his plan. So there's a huge phasing plan. Each member has a different task assigned to him or her on how we would address security, how we address curriculum concerns, how we address food service. And so we have our second meeting on Friday, and there'll actually be a plan, hoping that it's all together and that we can present that in January to the board.
But these classrooms, they're better than trailers. Double wide trailers, and they're huge.
They're huge. I mean,
each room is what's
750 square feet.
So each building 7,000 plus a hallway, so it's 8,000 square feet.
And in most cases, sadly, because the high school is in such poor condition in many areas, most of the classrooms are much nicer condition than actually what our students and staff are working and learning in right now.
They're air conditioned.
And they're air conditioned.
Dr. Esplin, I know you said this, but if you want to comment, or Jen, if you want to comment, us voting on this is not closing the high school for 2020-2021. This is because we need these facilities in order to do a two-phase or one-phase plan.
That's very well put. So what I would say, usually I don't like to say things in the negative, but in this case I would have to. If you don't approve, whether it's tonight or another time, we want it to be tonight. If you don't approve a modular classroom, we won't be doing any work at the high school. Because we just don't have the ability to do it, because the first thing we have to do, well, first, he's the expert, but one of the first things we have to do is get the water pipes out, and they're embedded in the walls. And so basically we have to knock the walls out. And so, yeah, we have to have alternative venue. So this just secures our spot to be able to order the ones that we need so that we can start making plans to get that done. Thank you.
Additional questions? Allison?
We're voting on the acceptance of the bid from Innovative Modular, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Walters?
Yes.
Surratt?
Aye.
Hennigan?
Yes.
Lyon?
Yes.
Phelps?
Yes.
Rodriguez? Aye.
Okay. Next, I have a motion to consider approval of the K-4 playground grant proposal.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, let's see.
You received information regarding the playground matching grant proposal and bid that we received from Game Time and Cunningham Playgrounds for really 4 different playgrounds that we're looking at. So over here, we've put the pictures up kind of as a reference. I know it's hard for the audience to see them. But we're looking at a new playground for King, which would be comparable to the playgrounds that we have at Silas and we have at Steele School. And then because our K-4 buildings are going to become larger and we have more sections of students, we're looking at putting in 3 smaller playgrounds that could accommodate our K-1 students. So I know this is something that has been brought up since we put in our new playgrounds, that it would be nice to be able to have some smaller equipment for our younger students. I initially just asked for a price on this, but was pleasantly surprised when we were offered a matching grant again. This is the same grant that we received with our partnership with the city from Game Time Playground Systems. The original price was $225,000, and we are actually receiving it with a grant application for $126,446, and that is for all 4 playgrounds. So that will mean that we have all new playgrounds that are no older than 2016 at all of our K-6 facilities in the community. So they're wonderful playgrounds. They're ADA compliant. You know, they really provide safe play learning experiences for our students.
Questions?
The first, which once again, I'll say this, I've said it multiple times, I'm glad we've gotten out of asking specific schools to raise money to put up playgrounds. If we view it's important, it should happen regardless of Candy's paying for it. And I'm glad Candy is not paying for it, okay? And we found the district resources to do that. The piece that I'm not comfortable with is that a purchase of this amount has not gone out to bid. I've shared that with you previously, and I just, on record, that I think purchases of this size should have been bid out.
Why was it not bid?
Well, we received a grant. This is actually an exception. This is a product or this is a service that we do not have to bid out. Because each playground system is so proprietary, it's very difficult to write specs because they each have their unique systems, unique products. This was a company that we worked with our partnership with the city, and they received the same grant last year, which allowed us to partner with them and put up the Lombard playground. And when we looked at them again, they said that this grant is available. We were able to purchase by the end of the year. We would be able to take advantage of this 50% matching grant. So
use it or lose it.
That's right. And just as an example, we've had grant opportunities with other companies. I believe Mrs. Springer applied for a grant for Stylus. We received a really great price on that. It was $78,000 for our Stylus playground. And Mrs. Graves also applied for a grant for steel, and I think we were in the neighborhood of $85,000 to $87,000. And this one is $86,000 for the King playground, and then the other costs are involving the K1. So it's very comparable to what we've paid and received in other grant programs with other companies. Did you have anything to share about?
Well, we utilize that TCPN, which I assume you utilize, so we already get the lowest government rate in that realm for a TCPN. And I do not know the full name of the TCPN. I just like
I was waiting for it. It was something partnership.
As trivial as it may seem, would they be able to match the aesthetics of the existing units that are at Silas?
They did. Yes.
Yes.
Those schools, the new schools.
Actually, the pictures are up there, and that's one thing. I'm very cognizant of design and color, and we made sure that we wanted everything to match. And so, actually, what we've done at both here and Stylus, we had a whole new palette at King that we did it from. Is we actually alternated the core colors. So when you go to Silas Willard, for example, it's mostly navy with orange accessories, and so the main pieces for the K1 playground are orange with navy accessories, so that we can complement them. They look different, but they definitely coordinate. So that is not, that's not trivial. We spent a lot of money. We want them to look nice.
Well, and I think it's in almost every opportunity you have to bid, you should bid, because you're being transparent, you're going to the lowest responsible bidder, you're saving money. And I said almost for a reason, because this is one where I would absolutely think it would be a mistake for many of the reasons that Ms. Ham already said. I am extremely confident we will not get it cheaper than this, having purchased several playgrounds over my career. This is a very low price. And two, we already know this company. We've worked with this company. The kids like the playground equipment. We've really made a focus on getting the type of equipment that all students can take part and play on. This company's been a great partner with us to do that. And we're really providing a tremendous service to the children and an equitable service to all children. And we can do it for the lowest price possible for our taxpayers, even though it seems a little counterintuitive by not bidding it. But in this particular circumstance, that would be correct.
Any additional comments? Allison?
Walters?
Aye.
Cervantes?
Aye.
Hannigan? Ryan?
No.
Phelps?
Aye.
Rodriguez? Aye. Sharkey?
Okay, next I have a motion to consider approval of the lumbar change order request.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Ms. Sam.
So this change order request is for fencing. In our planning process, we are adding a hard surface playground to the north of the new Lombard playground that was built with a partnership with the city. When we were having discussions about the size of the hard surface playground and how that would interact with the existing playground, it was suggested that we put up a large chain link fence between the hard surface playground and the existing playground, so that balls and things, as kids are playing basketball and volleyball and things like that on the hard surface playground, that they're not constantly bombarding the playground. So this is for the change order to put a 10-foot fence that would go on the south end of the hard surface playground that we'll be putting in the spring at Lombard that is adjacent to the playground.
So that goes on top of the previous football field.
No, it's
to the south.
To the north.
It's going to the north.
Toward the building.
Correct. So it's
Fill it in an empty space.
Yeah.
exactly, it's directly north of the playground.
What's the cost?
11,000.
550.
Okay.
Any other questions? Allison?
Sorrentez?
Aye.
Hannigan?
Aye.
Ryan?
Yes.
Phelps?
Aye.
Rodriguez? Aye. Sharkey?
Okay, next, do I have motion to approve King Elementary bid package 2? Ms. Ham?
So before you tonight is the very extensive bid package 2 for King's School. If you recall, we approved bid package 1, which was for concrete site work and steel. This is for basically the rest of the building. We did opt to bid for full renovations with deduct possibilities depending on what the bids come in. So once we get those bids in, then the board can make a decision whether they want to take the bids in full, if they want to explore deduct options, depending on what those bids come in at.
Questions?
Comments too?
Yeah, any comments too?
Okay, I probably put too much of Brian in these times today, but I just want to caution the rest of the board on this concept of the deduct items, because the basic bid includes things like making sure we have double pane windows in the classroom, in the rooms, in the current building, which we don't have. The basic bid includes renovation of the current hallways so you can bring more light in the classroom and to put lockers and better storage for the teachers. So as much as when this comes back in a month, 2 months, how long will it?
It'll be back in December to vote on.
Okay, December, I caution us not to consider not making sure that we renovate the entire building. Otherwise, we will end up having hallways looking the same as they do now with the tile on the floor. And it's a worry of mine because we promised the community we'd have the entire buildings remodeled, and we wouldn't be doing that. We would have a nice wing and some really, I won't use the word I used at our meeting, less desirable 3 wings. So I just caution us not to be too frugal when we look at these bids in a market.
So this is just approval of the bid package.
Any other questions? Because we'll speak specifics next month, correct?
Correct.
This
We'll
is
have
just
specific
approving-
pricing.
Right.
This is just
300
approving the
pages.
specs so that, yeah,
300 pages.
what it was.
Next group.
But, yeah, this is just approving the specs, so when we approve the, hopefully, approve the bids, they directly reflect the specs that we wanted. And these specs are all based off of the hundreds of hours of put in of community faculty, committee work, input, and trying to make sure that we look specifically at steel, because that building's been renovated more recently, and trying to give them equitable learning spaces so that King and Steel aren't identical, which is fine, but they're equitable. An opportunity.
Thank you for your comments, number one. If no other comments, Allison?
Flanagan.
Yes.
Ryan.
Yes.
Phelps.
Yes.
Rodriguez. Yes. Shuki.
Yes.
Walters.
Aye.
Cervantes.
Aye. And next, do I have a motion to consider approval of sound system for field gym?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Ham?
So before you tonight is a request to approve a bid from Music Makers, here in Galesburg for replacement of the field sound system for $30,637. The current system is very outdated and very poor condition. We have a lot of issues where I know at homecoming this year the system did not work at points. We had our dance team performing and the system was cutting out. Currently the wiring is underneath our gym floor and it's original wiring as far as we can tell. The speakers that were installed many, many years ago, we don't have a date on them, were not even originally designed for a gymnasium. So if we want to continue to have quality events in that facility, we need to have a sound system so that our fans and our students and our faculty can hear what is going on.
I would echo that there was a volleyball game that was extremely difficult to hear as well because Jeff was so busy leaning down trying to hold the wire while he talked on the microphone and announcing different things that it impacts a lot of things in that area.
Do we know how old the current sound system is?
No, we don't. So it's old.
Well, and yeah,
The issue is not working.
yeah, and it's definitely substandard. Now in this, Eric, I apologize for not giving you a heads up, but this system is wireless, correct? This isn't going to include any wiring.
So one of the main things is that the wiring under the floor it's got to be original. And when they redid the floor, that would have been the time to take that out. Well, they didn't, so that's what we have. But with this system, it'll be all wireless. Eventually, over time, we think we can replace the wiring under the floor, but this time everything is almost wireless. So we're going to leave what we have under there in case we get something happens and we need to tap into it. But other than that, everything will be wireless. The microphones, the belt pack, and then just everything that we have at the table will be wireless. We won't even plug into the floor.
But we're buying a soundboard and all that.
Well, you need a soundboard.
Yeah. I mean, we're going to be able to reuse the it's called the rack where we will house everything. We're going to be able to use that, take out the guts, put everything in, and then everything will be locked up. It'll be as simple as you just come in, you flip the switch on, the system comes on, no one touches it. I'll have the key because it'll all be preset, ready to go. And that's the way it needs to be.
I would echo that for the.
And we'll have more speakers. There'll be some subwoofers up in the ceiling. It'll just be, that's pretty much what the gym is lacking at this point. Everything else has been replaced at some time, but that sound system is. I even said, can we sell it? And Dave's like, no one wants that. He's like, and I'm going to go take it either. So it's just
this one, doing this now will affect its renovation whenever we get to doing the gym?
No, we're not doing anything to feel.
We're not doing anything inside the actual gymnasium.
Right.
Never?
Well,
we're not looking at air conditioning.
Well, that wouldn't affect
any of this
sound
either.
system.
Okay. No, it'll be fine.
But I mean, our bleachers have been replaced. We have a new floor.
And our goal is, if we can get this done before the Hall of Fame inductions at the end of the month. We need about 3.5 days to get it done. And, the good thing is we use it for first block, but other than that, it's empty throughout the day, so we feel like we can get in, work, put things away, have practice, and then go at it again. And that was part of the bid specs, is it had to be done by a certain date, and they can do that. And we got 2 bids, and this one was considerably lower than the other one. And then it's local. Yep.
This is not related to the field gym sound system. But at some point, are we going to be investigating the sound system between the high school and field house and adjacent buildings? Because
That all needs to be replaced.
when you're in the field house and somebody's on the intercom, okay, first of all, side note, try holding a practice in a room. Wow, the haunted house music is happening and there's no way to turn it off because the sound system's tied together and you're not even in the high school building. You're actually in the field house. And you have to turn the music up a little bit louder so that they can actually hear the beat that they're dancing to rather than the Monster Mash. That was fun, but then if somebody comes over the speaker, it sounds like the Charlie Brown teacher. And I'm like, was that supposed to be meant for somebody in this room or this building? Because that's unfortunate if it was. So
Our entire sound system, they basically tied into the existing system at the high school when they built the field house, from my understanding. But all of that needs to be coordinated and replaced.
Yes, please. Okay, for another day. But it was adjacent. I thought I could take an opportunity to just express that. One more than you put to the list. All right, any other questions regarding the sound system? Awesome.
Klein,
Aye. Yes.
Phelps,
Yes.
Rodriguez. Aye. Schiffy.
Yes.
Walters.
Aye.
Mr. Montrose.
Aye.
Hagen.
Aye.
Okay, and before we jump into focus area 3, where we are literally just 2 elements away from the end of our meeting, there are some big discussion items within this next area. So per Member Lyons' request a long time ago, if the meeting hit 9 o'clock, we were going to take a 5-minute break. So we will come back at 9 to make it even, 9:10.
Thank you, members.
pretty
By coincidence. Hey, if you're starting late, I
All right, folks, we're gonna bring it back together. Thank you for, well, I'm sure I wasn't the only one that needed to okay, moving forward, focus area 3, responding to the changing needs of our community. First up on this is our continued boundary discussion. Dr. Osborne.
Thank you. So, at your spot, hopefully, there's, we said that at the last meeting we would talk about busing and look at specific routes, try to figure out, at least based on our best guess at this point, what our busing would look like. And then Ms. Ian is the one that actually put this here, so I'll turn it over to you. Or did Paulette put that over?
Well, I passed it out, but Mrs. actually did it, and I am happy to talk about it.
Although I think Paulette's in the back.
I did pass them out.
Paulette, would you like to come up here for a second, please?
Oh, you just.
Want me to explain this or what?
Yes, please put some context to this.
Is that available for the screen?
No, we just got it. We can put it up out there after the fact.
Well, Jen Ham and I had talked and we decided that the K-6 students would all ride together and then the 7-12 students would ride together. Right now with King and Lombard students, there would be 542 students in the King boundary, which would be 8 buses. King currently has 3 buses.
8 buses for that many students. Okay, go ahead.
Those are the Lombard kids that are within the King boundary.
That are bus students,
Yes,
not the okay.
busing, yes.
That are eligible for
That are
busing.
eligible,
Right, because the distance or the other side of a hazardous route.
Correct.
Okay.
So King and Lombard would be a total of 8 buses. The Silas boundary, and then Lombard students that would be eligible to be bused in the Silas boundary. Totals 293, so that'd be 5 buses. Silas currently has 2 buses, just Silas. I mean, the current busing doesn't have the 6th graders. Scratch that. Steel boundary with the Lombard students would total 580 students, which would be 10 buses, and Steel currently has 4. Currently, K-5 buses, we have 20 routes through first student. And then we've got 3 of our own district buses for a total of 23 routes. And with the proposed boundary changes, it would raise to 25 buses, just for K-6. I would anticipate the 7-12 busing to be a little bit less, because we have fewer students. And again, these are eligible students, not necessarily
Right.
2 rides.
Well, we currently, when you count a route, so if they are picked up, like a bus goes out and picks up high school students and comes back and picks up another route of students, that's how many rounds?
I consider that 1.
Okay, just want to make sure everybody's looking at the same number.
Yeah.
So
It's a 2-tier, but
Right.
yes, it's 1 round.
Right.
And currently our 6-12 students ride the bus together as it is, so that's not really a change moving forward when we go to the 7-12 complex.
our two tiers moving forward would be a K-6 tier and a 7-12 tier.
Correct.
Instead of a K-5 and a 7-12.
Correct.
6-12.
Correct.
Right.
So that's the only change there.
And a conversation, and it was a good comment from Member Phelps, or no, I'm sorry. Yes, Member Phelps, sorry, I thought it was last month, is that we need to figure out a manner in which we can get a better handle on our families that are actually writing every day. So we have families that are eligible, but don't tell us that I'm never going to put my child on the bus. So we need to figure out a manner in which we can get that information and then potentially reduce some of our routes. Because right now, you are correct. We have buses that are virtually empty, but all of those parents have signed up for transportation. And so until they decline transportation, we have to leave a spot on the bus for them. So we're hoping to figure out some kind of mechanism to do that. But if they don't decline transportation, then we have to basically reserve a seat for them.
How many of these buses at various schools start in the country and then come to pick up town kids?
Right now, just one.
And what would that look like?
Steel bus runs a rural route, and then it picks up at Swings and Harding and Variant on the way to Steel.
But so the children that are currently in the Gale areas, most of them are going to the Steel.
Yeah, yes, I guess you
So
could
there'd be
say,
another
because
route
H picks
there.
up out at Lake Story, out around Lake Story, and then it picks up the Parkway and Holland Tree.
And in the Willard, children in Henderson will be going there, correct?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a country bus that will be delivered and currently delivers there as well.
Not to Silas currently.
Where do those children go currently?
Gale.
They currently go to Gale.
Any other?
Yeah, so this is based on the boundary that we showed last month. This is a potential impact of busing. Okay, so that's a piece of information everybody needs to know. In terms of dollars on that, we'd have to put some numbers to that. We just got this finalized, so
About 50,000.
yeah, about 150,000. You think more? Yeah.
Which we receive.
Which we receive 80%. Well, by formula, we receive 80% of our cost back, but that 80% is prorated down to as low as 57% in this worst year and as high as 94% in the best year in the last 10. So, ideally, you get 80% of your cost back, but that's another reason I'm going to a state board meeting here pretty soon. So, in looking at that, that's our cost is $150,000. So, take 20% of that on a best case scenario, it's going to cost more. So, $30,000. But that's obviously a consideration that needs to be made.
Currently, we have some crossing guards that cross kids going to Gale. And they won't be having those anymore, obviously.
Right. And
so
also
there will be
with
some
the
cost
Nielsen.
savings there.
That's a contracted
shared-
service.
Can we share the
service with the
cost?
city.
That's a
We pay
contracted.
half of it or something?
We pay for half of their salaries, and I would have to look and see
What that
is.
So there
But I
is
can
some.
get that. Yeah. I'm guessing maybe $15,000 to $20,000.
I mean, the extra cost in transportation is nowhere near the savings of closing a building, but it is important for everybody to know what those costs are.
And to that point, I'm going to make a very unpopular comment. This is me again, being the unpopular person. For a community who does not hesitate to comment on the amount of money that this district spends, I would ask that you become a partner in this work. Because if we're going to budget for 23 buses, and you know that your kid is not going to ride a bus, then maybe we should think about how we're actually signing our kids up. Because if we don't need 23 bus routes because kids aren't riding a bus, that's saving us money. But right now we have to budget, we have to plan on every student who signs up for their kid to be bused. And you may sign your kid up to be bused because on the off chance you may need that bus. I'd rather we have to opt in and say, you know what? I know that I'm going to need a bus for my kid because of such and such and such and such. So why don't we create a method for someone to say, is there a bus location near me in the case that I need to, but I'm going to say for the majority of the time my kid's not on a bus. But on that rare occasion that I need it, I can go online or I can make a phone call and I can say on this day, I need a bus pickup. And it's on the route. And here's the route. And here's the time. Because this, I mean, it doesn't sound like a lot of money, but if we're going to estimate a $150,000 increase, as was reiterated about 4 years ago, how many positions is that?
3.
Okay, 3 positions. So I'm just asking for a partnership with the community instead of just critiques.
As for other considerations, some of which you heard tonight with community members that presented, we can set up times to look at some other options. And I think it's important to explain. Typically, we don't answer folks out that ask questions, but I think it's important. There's a reason we didn't do this live because we would run a danger of identifying particular students if we started putting things up there and showing the head counts that we get. And when we look at these maps, we can see them by color code, meaning their free and reduced lunch status. We cannot be in the business of identifying where individual kids live and identifying their free and reduced lunch status. So that's the reason why a lot of this stuff is done when people aren't necessarily, cameras aren't on, people aren't looking. But if board members would like to come in over the next month and look at any other variation of that, I mean, I think we could do, as we said last month, we could do whatever in looking at trying to equalize out the free and reduced lunch counts. This was the best option that we presented at the time. But if we want to look at other options and see what's out there, that's fine. We just need to be able to move forward on something pretty soon because we need to be able to give parents, and it's not on tonight for approval anyway, so I mean, we're not delaying anything.
But our goal is to come to some closure next month.
That would be the goal, yeah.
We would need to.
So, Aaron, one of the speakers today asked about our plans for transition, which is a really good point. I mean, parents should have the opportunity to visit schools.
Absolutely.
Children opportunity to visit schools.
One of the challenges is going to be because our schools don't look the way they're going to look when our students come in the fall. So our hope is that our schools are done. I'm going to give Lee. Lee. Good. All right, good. Then awesome. Our hope is, and we had this conversation today, is that for the most part we would be substantially done in most of our schools by August 1st. We need to do, furniture staging. We need to do a lot of different things to get those classrooms ready. Plus, we'll be finishing items. Probably King is going to be the latest in that time schedule. But that is definitely something that Mrs. Pickrell is working on how we, welcome our families in, how we transition our staff, how we transition our students. There's going to be a very comprehensive plan. So
I think it has to be much sooner than that. I mean, the biggest move, as pointed out by speakers today, and we knew from last time, are those people who will be going to Steele. Steele, in many ways, while we're adding an addition to it, the core of the building is not going to be changing. We know what it looks like. We know how it feels. I think there should be something sooner rather than later for those people out there to see that school, which I think is a honey of a building with great natural light. Our buildings are all open right now anyway. I would hope people would avail themselves of visiting at any time without a plan for transition, if they have any question.
Well, I would caution that. I mean, we can't have 100 people coming in during a school day.
It's not going to happen.
but there probably needs to be a set time when they could do that. And I'll need to work with principals, and we'll need to work with Mrs. Pickrell on that. But you're also looking at transitioning a large number of students. Right now, those are construction zones. We barely have enough parking for our staff on any given day, let alone inviting potentially 600 students into that building for a tour, because you'd be looking at all of the students that would be in that building next year. So
many are already there.
Some are there, yes. But if you're
And
talking
in some
about
cases, we also have children who are moving from the Steel area to Willard, which is already finished.
correct
And we have the ability to
that
do
one's
that.
easy. That one is
And it doesn't have to be when we're open.
I think we could think about some ideas, some open houses and some tours. But I think one of the other things to think about, change is hard. Part of our responsibility as adults, again, unpopular opinion, as adults, as educators, whether that's in your parental role or your role as a teacher, because we're going to have some staff changes as well, right? Because we have to reallocate our resources from 5 buildings to 3, to 4, right? The 3 elementaries and the 1 5 6 building. So there's going to be adjustment and change for a lot of individuals in this district next year. I understand that it feels nonsensical. I'm trying to think of a word, but that's the only thing that could come up to me. When you're driving past a building to go to another building, as far as criteria, we led as a board. We're going to take ownership for how these boundaries are set, because we are the ones that set the requirement to Dr. Asplund and his team to say we need to recognize that 1 or 2 schools are not going to be concentrated with families who are eligible for free and reduced lunch. And in many of the models that allowed for people within a certain range to stay within their quote-unquote home school, set our schools up so that there was an imbalance in that representation. And coming from my own perspective, as a parent of someone who is a free and reduced lunch kid, while we say that there are not implications for that, or having misrepresentation, overrepresentation in certain schools regarding that, I can tell you from years of bias and complex that does matter. It matters. Racial demographic and making sure that racial demographics in our community are represented in all of our school buildings matters. It matters because you can go out on the street right now and you can have a conversation with anybody and say, oh, I don't want my kid going to that school. And it doesn't sometimes have anything to do with the distance from the house. It has to do with the side of the town it's on. It has to do with what housing project it's next to. And those are biases. And we are trying to very readily, very transparently, very intentionally, on my part, get rid of those. I'm not going to apologize for that. I'm not insensitive to the fact that this is going to be a hard change for people to have, but this is going to be a change on a massive level for this entire district, from teachers on down to students. Because teachers are going to be moving buildings as well. They're going to be working with new team members. They're going to be working with new administrators. They may be working with new class material, new class grades. Those are adjustments for them to make. They're going to be meeting new families. We as the adults, from the parents to the administrators to the teachers, have a role to play in figuring out how this works and how best to make this work. I feel like I'm lecturing, and in some way I feel like I kind of am. But I also recognize, I moved my kid out of District 205 and into the Chicago school system. a Chicago school system that I was worried what that would look like because of all of the nasty things that I heard growing up in Galesburg about what Chicago is. And it was probably one of the best moves that I could have made for my son. We knew no one. He knew no one. It was a new field. It was a new city. And it changed his whole world and his whole insight into life at the age of 7. So my ask is that our constituents recognize that we have not come to these decisions lightly, that these decisions have been made with some intentionality, that we recognize that change is going to be hard, and we're asking people to come along with us together, and that if you have concerns about PALs after school or bus routes, that you engage in these conversations with us because we can't do this without you. But outside of basically making Silas a 0 free and reduced lunch school and King and Steele free and reduced schools, that was it. That was most of the models that were shown to us. That's what was going to happen. And that's, to me, I don't know, as an educator, that feels unfair.
And it was, one of the questions that was asked was if we were going to have PALs at Lombard, and we have already had conversations with the Y. That is we have not signed anything. That is both of our intentions to have PALs at Lombard as well. So.
And Dr. Asplin, the conversation about grade level centers was had a year ago.
Right, yeah, the grade level centers, that didn't work because
Silas. We had money to fix up all the buildings.
Well, we didn't have money to fix up all the buildings, and Silas Willer wasn't big enough to be a grade center.
And there was increased transportation costs.
Yeah, the transportation cost, that got more negative feedback than what we're trying to do. So.
In the community meetings, that was an option that was not favored by doing the grade level centers.
And so, even if we wanted to pursue it, one, we knew the feedback was negative, and 2, logistically, it was not really going to work out.
But I do think there are things that we as a district can do to alleviate some of the anxiety for families who are going to have to make the transition. I think thinking about ways to have open houses at the different elementary schools, and we are working our best to make sure that staff decisions are made as early as possible. And so there might even be ways for us to get at those open houses, the staffing,
the new
staffing
absolutely.
of all of those, so that you can actually, an open house and meet and mingle, and who's going to be teaching first grade and who's going to be teaching third grade, et cetera. I think that is definitely warranted, so that folks can kind of get to know what their school looks like.
I do have a question.
Yes.
Following up on comments made by Mr. Moore. And I gotta say, I haven't looked at the time schedules of the different schools, but she expressed concerns about being able to take her kids to each of the 3 schools.
Right.
Will you have a school schedule that accounts for that, so that
it needs to be responsive to that reality? Absolutely. I mean, we can. I think it's reasonable for us to assume that it's okay to start the 3 elementaries as close to the same time as possible, because that's not a pain point. The Lombard difference and the high school 7-12 difference, we'll need to adjust those enough to make sure that they're not concurrent. You can't. Well, you do cheer bus, so you can't do it anyway. But I'm saying the Lombard part of it.
Right.
And the presence of PALs does ease that a little bit. But yes, we are aware of that. That's something we have to make sure we get. I guess the question becomes, how much is enough? Like, is it a half hour? Is it 20 minutes? 10 minutes? That's where we have to get that as close to right as we can.
I just remember doing that myself for a couple of years.
Absolutely.
Make the rounds to 3 schools, and it is a little stressful.
Yeah, no, it is, absolutely. My prior communities where I was the superintendent, my 2 children were 7 miles apart, and the schools got to dismiss at the same time. Yeah, it was hard.
To illustrate my point, I don't know, I had this discussion in a different meeting. Was there anyone who's from King? Anyone from King? It's Amy. I couldn't really kind of see her behind Mr. Prats. I don't know if you were part of this or not, but some teachers expressed to me that when the furniture samples were brought into King, was that last week or the week before? Last week. That as your students in your building walked through the doors, were you told what they were saying? The teachers that worked in that building said, and this broke my heart, and this is an illustration of what I'm talking about. When they saw the furniture samples in King, they walked by and they said, "That's the rich school furniture. Wow. Look at that." No, the students. So if you think that students do not and cannot tell the difference between the elementary schools that they are attending, for them to walk through their building and to say, unprovoked, "That's the rich school furniture," that is what we're trying to alleviate in this district.
I followed up back. I apologize. Obviously, as a district, we obviously have we're supposed to be looking at these boundaries. Nothing has really caused the necessity to do so, like we have now, closing schools, right? The unfortunate thing is someone is always going to be 0.2, 0.6, 0.9 miles from that boundary, and you can't continually just move it. And I don't want to say to accommodate, but you can't just keep moving it. There has to be a line, right? I think we as a district, we need to ensure that all students have access to fair and equitable resources, facilities. And I don't necessarily look at someone saying, and maybe I'm naive, I don't look at someone saying that's rich person furniture, or rich school furniture, as a socioeconomic thing, as a more so, that is a new facility, and they have tons of upgrades and things that some of the other schools don't have, right? So me, as a board member, I know my kids are going to be going to the best school possible, regardless of location. As a father, right, I share some of the same concerns that you guys do in looking at just distances, right? And you know, everything was done to try and balance out free lunches. Sometimes maybe to a fault. Looking at, off of Monmouth Boulevard, just looking at distances. Lancaster, Lyman, West 5th, that's 3.4 miles to Silas, 1 mile to Steele, right? So that's going to impact walkability. It's going to impact busing. It's also, and it's impacting where those people have gone. Looking at Holton, right? They're going to be going to Silas. 2.4 miles to King, 1.5 miles to Steele, 2.3 to Silas. Unfortunately, or fortunately, tough decisions have to be made. And with these decisions, knowing sometimes it's a longer distance of travel, I know, again, that my students, my kids, the students in the community will still have access to the best facilities possible because that's what we're doing right now, right? So to say that someone is moving from King to Steele or Steele to Silas or Silas to Steele, there's going to be a change or lack of education. I don't agree with that. Or that they won't have access to friends or the same teachers. We're looking out for the community as a whole. So.
And per policy, we have the right to change the boundaries every year. So we could do this every year, but we don't. We're doing this one time because we're making this big change. We're trying to make it fair for everybody. Not just the Silas community, not just the Steele community, not just the King community.
Yeah, and if we are following our policy, we will be looking.
Well, we do look at them every year, but we could change them every year.
Right, we have.
We don't.
And so it will be
right.
It will be important to look at it every year, but it is also important to try to be consistent as much as possible.
I will comment on the open house thing that you guys are saying. I did notice in the building reports that Steele had a copy with the principals, and I liked that idea. that they had the parents come in if they wanted to talk about the new building stuff. So that's like a good idea to have in the morning, and then you can also have something at night too, because not parents can always make the morning thing. So I like that.
I have a comment on the busing. So you brought up opt-in or opt-out. I think in today's technology and with Skyward and all that, I like the idea of opt-in or opt-out. I can tell you for my kid, I didn't realize when we registered my children, I would say I need buses or not. My 2 girls haven't ridden the bus yet this year. So I feel bad. I mean, I'm part of the problem.
You are one of them.
But you're an honest part of the problem.
So what I'm telling you is they're not going to ride the rest of the year. But if I want that bus, I've got the lady's number on my phone. I can get her to pick my kids up. But I guess, and don't need an answer now, but I think we need to research that. Because there's things my girls can look up on Skyward now, I didn't know I can. Surely we can have I need a bus, or no, I don't need a bus somehow. So, and then if
we can definitely look at some options and see how we can streamline that process. And maybe we have I don't know, just kind of spitballing here, but maybe we have like a roving bus that if you choose to opt out, but you have an emergency, or you give us 5 days notice that this, kind of opt-in bus, it may take you a little longer to get home because you're not on a normal route, but there is an option for those kiddos that might need something in an emergency situation.
But like in our case, they don't ride in the morning, but they ride at night.
Yeah, and that makes it hard. That makes it hard.
I know it's not easy, but I think we ought to research it.
Yep, I agree. And it's difficult to get bus drivers, so, if we can.
That's not our problem.
Ultimately, it is, though.
Do you have the ability to run data on the variance in bus riders throughout a year, or once we have eligibility? I mean, we really don't have a way, right? Because we don't know actually who's getting on the bus, other than asking people on the bus to count.
We did head counts, I think it was last year, and got like percentages of what grade levels were in. Of course, high school was.
But not individuals, there isn't like an attendance.
Right, there's not a.
Is that what you meant, attendance?
Well, something like that, but, right, because, and that's what I said, there isn't really a way to track that. We can only track who signs up, but we aren't really tracking who rides, except maybe at the elementary level, because you have to put them in lines, right? You got a bus rider, pick up house, right?
They track every day who's on their bus, but you would have to go through every single one of those attendance sheets and then enter it into some kind of database to determine how many,
I feel like we're in the 21st century.
Well, there is software, I'm not familiar with it, that kids carry like an ID and it scans. It's got a barcode on it and it scans into the system that they get on. I'm not familiar with it at all.
Does that work with that system that First Student is looking at?
I am not sure.
No, that system is just for discipline.
No. The where your bus is system.
The train spot? Oh, you mean the Zonar?
Yeah.
Viewfinder.
Viewfinder.
Oh, so parents could log in and see.
See where the bus is at.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if that.
I'm sure that's relevant.
But I guess my comment to Member Savani's point, $150,000 doesn't sound like a lot of money, but if we did that 4 and 5 times, now it's real money. So if I still see buses running around the country with no kids in them.
They're just short, they don't see them.
No, they're not the short buses either. They're the big ones.
Alright.
Thank you, Paula.
Thank you.
I do think that if folks do have a conversation, I would encourage, or a question about the boundaries, I would encourage you, because the models do exist. So if you have questions about how those were determined, I agree with Dr. Asplund. I hesitate to put them on there because in order for you to see the ways in which that was created, you realistically could see kids in your neighborhood, and the way they're color coded in the map, you would know if they're on free and reduced lunch. So if you have some of those questions about what those maps would look like otherwise, I would encourage you to reach out to Dr. Asplund because they have those models and they can show them to you. Okay, next item. This is why we took the break in here. Consider it. Do I have a motion to consider approval of the tentative tax levy?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all right, so tonight we're going to talk about our tentative tax levy. We're gonna kind of go through the basics of how a levy is presented, how a levy is determined, because this is something that's really foreign to most people, and it's very unusual, the timing for a levy. So we're gonna go through Tax Levy 101. So each year in December, school districts all across the state of Illinois present their tax levies to their county clerks. We have 2 counties in our school district, which are Knox and Warren counties.
Can you define what a levy is?
A levy is how much property tax is being requested from homeowners and property owners to help fund a portion of the district. And in Illinois, we are very property tax dependent to fund our schools through our levy. Since the district operates on a modified accrual method, this is the type of accounting method we use here in District 205. The money requested for the levy, which happens in December, will fund approximately 53% of our current fiscal year budget, and a fiscal year runs from July 1st to June 30th, and about 47% of the next year's budget. When a levy is approved and submitted in December, the county does not know what our exact equalized assessed valuation is for the previous tax year. So the levy that I'm presenting tonight that will be approved in December is for the tax year 2019, so for this year. So the problem is that the county does not know what the value of all the property is at that time. They will not know what the value of that property is until sometime in mid-spring. So typically somewhere around April or May, this year was very late, it was the beginning of June, we receive our property tax extension and we get the exact amount of dollars that either the property values have increased or decreased within the school district. So by having to have this by law into the county clerks by December, we have to make basically an educated guess on what we believe based on trend data, based on information from the county clerk's offices, how much we think the property values within our counties increased or decreased in the next year, because we actually have to ask for a specific amount of money. If we ask for too much, then it can be adjusted, but if we don't ask for enough, we can't go back and say, we didn't realize that the property values were going to increase by 3%, we only asked for 2.5% increase, and then we basically leave money on the table. So it's a tricky situation in kind of determining, like I said, through trend data and through information we receive from the county clerks on what our equalized assessed valuation will be for the next year. To ensure that we capture all of the dollars that we can, since we are so heavily dependent on property taxes to fund our district, we do something which is called a balloon levy. So I'm going to present a little bit later on that we anticipate that we think that the equalized assessed valuation within our 2-county region is going to increase by 3%. But that may come in at 3.2% or 3.25%. If we don't, on our levy certificate, ask for additional monies to cover that, then if it comes in at above 3%, we will, as I said before, leave money on the table in essence. So we create a levy that is more than we anticipate, but that covers because we don't know exactly what the EAV is going to be. So I'm going to show you 2 different examples tonight. I'm going to show you what I anticipate that we're actually going to receive through the extension, and then I'm going to show you what's going to appear on the levy certificate, which will be different, and that will account for that ballooning. Okay, so in April or May, as I said before, we will receive our extension from the county clerks that will tell us exactly what the EAV was and exactly what our extension, our actual dollars that we will receive. Our first tax receipts typically comes in somewhere between the end of May to the beginning of June. It depends on a myriad of factors. Each county clerk does it different. There are multipliers that the counties have to wait for from the state. So this year, you probably noticed that your property tax bills came a little late, and they were due a little bit later. So these are all factors that can vary from year to year. Some of the general assumptions that we used this year to create our levy were, per our trend data, we're looking at an estimated 3% increase in our EAV. In order to keep our tax rate level, we are reducing the levy requests in our building fund, IMRF, which is the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund, which all of our non-certified employees participate in this pension system, our lease levy, and our special education levy. So when we had the discussions about the building project a year ago, one of the commitments that we had was to attempt as much as possible to keep our levy rate the same, our property tax rate the same. In order to do that, because we have bonded more money to pay for these projects, we had to reduce our levy or our request, our ask, in some other funds. So we're zeroing those out. Just some other trend data. So the 5-year trend data in terms of our rate increase or decrease. You can see in 2018, our rate was $4.83. Same rate as in 2017. In 2016, it was $4.95. So actually, we decreased it from 2 years ago. 2015, we're at $4.70, and in 2014, we were at $4.59. As part of our property tax equation, the city has what they call TIFs, which are tax increment financing districts. The city has 6 TIFs, and within these TIFs, it limits the amount of property taxes that we can actually claim for certain regions or areas. So the downtown area is TIF number 1 for the city, for instance. So these have a pretty substantial impact on what the district collects each year in its property taxes as part of the levy. And so I just wanted the board, I kind of go through this every year to kind of see what the 5-year impact is. So last year, the impact on the TIFs were $517,000. So those are dollars that if the property wasn't in the TIF district, we could have accessed an additional $517,000 from property taxes within the district. But because those are set aside in TIFs, and TIFs are typically 20 years long, so it's a very long period of time that we don't have access to those dollars through property throughout the city. And Galesburg has a large portion of its business community that does fall within those TIF zones.
Excuse me, I think people need to be aware that those buildings still are paying property taxes to the school district. It's the increase in value that goes up into the TIF to pay out what expenses were incurred in the redevelopment of those spaces. The district still is collecting the amount of property tax before the improvements take place.
Right. So for instance, if a property was valued at $1 million before it went into the TIF, it freezes at that $1 million for the length of the TIF for 20 years. So with the TIF improvements, if the value of that property then goes up to $2 million, the district cannot access the difference in that between the $1 million and the $2 million. The property owner still pays property tax on that additional $1 million, but it goes into the TIF fund for redevelopment of that area. So it's not a tax break for the individual within the TIF zone, but it goes into basically a TIF account, if you wanted to consider it that way. And then businesses can apply for upgrades to their facilities through structural improvements, sewers, anything of other
streetscape projects.
Streetscape projects, yes.
I believe the first downtown TIF paid for the paving the area in the post office where we drop off our mail. Believe it or not, the government didn't pay for it, it was paid through TIF.
That's a good example. Another TIF zone that is pretty apparent in the last couple of years is the area around Hy-Vee gas station, the new Holiday Inn, Taco Bell. You've seen some big improvements as you come into the city from that area. That's all part of a TIF zone, and those TIF funds go to do that. So no, they do very, very good work. It just does divert dollars from the school district that we could access for other things. Our anticipated increase in our EAV, and from tax year 18, TY stands for tax year, from tax year 18 to tax year 19, we're anticipating about a 3% increase. So you can see we're looking in Knox County, for the actual EAV was about $420 million. We're looking at a projected EAV at $433 million. That's an increase of $12 million. Now that doesn't mean we get $12 million more dollars. That would be fantastic. I wish that's what that just means the property increased by that much. Warren County, also we're looking at a 3% increase from about $18.3 million to $18.8, and that's a $550,000 increase. We have a very small portion of our school district that is in Warren County, so that is why there's a substantial difference between those two. So we're looking at the property value within our school district increasing by about $13.1 million is what we're anticipating. So here we have our actual 2018 extension. So remember when I was, explaining the levy cycle before, the extension is what we actually got. The levy is what we're asking for, but we don't find out until April, May, this year, June, what we actually got from the property tax. So we're looking at the comparison of what we got last year and what we're asking for this year. So you can see that we've kept our rate at $4.83, which was the strong commitment that we made. We're looking at a total levy last year of $21.2 million, and we're looking at $21.8 million this coming year is what we're anticipating. You'll see that right here, let's see my arrow, we have a prior year adjustment for property tax, so that was taken off of our extension. And we also had $4.3 million in bonds and interest that we were paying. This year, we don't know if there will be any adjustments, so we can't really anticipate that. But we did have an additional approximately $500,000 in bonds and interest for additional bonding capability that we took out for the building project. So in order to do that, you can see that there were certain funds last year that we reduced down. For instance, in the building fund, that rate last year, the actual extension was 34 cents. This year we took it down to 33 cents. So it doesn't seem like, oh, you're thinking a penny, but when you're multiplying that over $433 million worth of value, it adds up over time. But we wanted to make sure that we committed to keeping that $4.83 tax rate as long as we possibly could. So once again, the rate that we're proposing is a steady $4.83 rate. We're anticipating a 3% increase. With actual revenue increase, because our bond payments did increase by about $500,000, we're only actually looking at about $63,000 in new revenue, almost $64,000 that would go into our remaining funds. So the majority of the new monies that we're going to capture from tax year 19 will go to pay off our bonded debt to help make the improvements that we needed to the schools. Does anyone have any initial questions? Yes.
I guess just for clarification, in the packet that's online, as well as what I'm looking at for the anticipated EAV, the presentation you had up said $433 million, but this says $439 million.
That was on this slide?
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, that was a mistake and it was corrected. So yes, I actually, that number was over. Which
the agenda that's online.
Yeah, I think we corrected that slide. Yeah. Yeah. So it's actually 433.
Thank you.
That number was transposed from the total from 2018. And so this is actually the corrected version.
Thank you.
So if you ask for 3 and it comes in 2.75,
We only get 2.75.
but if you only ask for 2.75, it comes in at 3, then
We only get 2.75. Yep.
So a real short way of saying this is we have certain funds, well, it's going crazy. We have certain funds that are maxed out by fund. So, and we can, because it's 10, we're not going to. We could get into discussion of tax caps versus non-tax cap. We're a non-tax cap district, but that means that we have individual funds that are capped. And so, building this levy, then we take those funds that are marked as needed and we try to get to the exact amount that we believe we need, and we put that amount in. We then balloon the levy in the other ones where we're capped at a rate, because that way we'll make sure we capture all the EAV that comes in, because we know that rate's only going to hit a ceiling. That way we can try to keep the tax rate steady and still get the money that's available if there's a big surprise on EAV increases from one year to the next.
How does our tax rate compare to school districts of comparable size? I'm talking about maybe communities like Pekin and Danville and Moline and Rock Island.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Ham, I'm just jumping in here, but that's really difficult to say because, for example, the communities you just used, Pekin's a dual district, which means they have a high school district, and then depending on what elementary district you're in, you're going to have different tax rates. To try to find a district like us, we'd have to do a little bit more defining of what that is, because if you are a school district up near the Chicago suburbs, or if you're Dunlap or you're Morton, your EAV is really high per pupil, whereas our EAV is really pretty low per pupil. So that's a difficult thing to say and talk about the tax rate from that perspective. So, we could look at Rock Island, and we could look at Kankakee, and we could look at Danville.
And show you local comparisons.
Yeah, we can show you that, and get you that. But yeah, the other ones are a little bit more difficult because they're just not, you can't compare apples to apples.
I can pull downstate LUDA districts, which is, LUDA stands for Large Urban District
Large
Association.
Unit District Association. Large Unit District
Oh, sorry, Large
Which
Unit
is a key component.
Yes, large unit, sorry. District Association, and I can pull the downstate LUDA districts that would be most comparable. But as Dr. Asplund said, each district has such unique features that it's somewhat difficult, but at least you can see what our tax rate is with our neighbors, even though they're really different than we are, but I can show you that next month.
I think the important piece is that we're not looking to raise the rate.
We are not.
Correct.
That's the bottom line, I think. That's an important bottom line.
Nick's going to leave with that. Right, Nick? Sure. First thing tomorrow morning. District not raising taxes, building you nice schools. How are they doing it? News at 6. Stuff writes itself.
Looking for a new job? He's trying to help Nick. Good guy.
Any other questions regarding this conversation? Yep, Allison.
Phelps.
Yes.
Rodriguez. Yes. Sherby.
Yes.
Walters.
Aye.
Montez.
Aye.
Hannigan.
Yes.
Yes.
You're not.
Sorry, Wendell.
That's all past your bedtime.
Okay.
After 9.
Okay. So next on the agenda, we need to have a discussion regarding the IASB Delegate Assembly recommendations so that Member Phelps has an idea of how as a board we would like to vote for District 205 during these discussions next week. Dr. Asman has an idea, so.
Yeah, so this is off the cuff here, but considering the time, and considering the sheer volume, I think it would be something worth considering if you just wanted to email him your opinions and let him know what those are, and he can tabulate those and let us know next month how he voted based on the feedback. Still accomplish the same goal.
That's a great idea.
I don't know. Great idea.
Don't wait until Wednesday night. Next Wednesday night, we'll do that.
See, I hate to say it, but these are just recommendations. Legislature's gonna do what they want, I mean.
Well, but I still think it's important that we vote.
So for the people in the gallery, right? We're represented as well down in the state, and we receive resolutions that they would like to know school boards want to support or not. And in some mannerisms, these resolutions will help all of us, and some of them, it's a pretty particular thing to that school district, and they really didn't need a resolution, in my opinion. And some of these are really important. Like one of the resolutions that's up is the ability for districts to have law enforcement or school officers carry guns. I think it's really important that District 205 put their voice to that. So, I mean, if anybody's interested in what this looks like, I'm happy to show you.
There's 18 of them in here that we can discuss right now.
But in lieu of time, I'm seeing some head nods. So we're going to give our recommendations to Member Phelps to vote. But to Member Lyons' point, the room is full of like 435 different individuals that are voting for their districts as well. So.
Maybe that costs more.
All right, so everybody get their opinions to Member Phelps prior to Wednesday.
Not tomorrow.
Right, a week from tomorrow. All right, next on the agenda is consider approval of trip requests. Do we have a motion?
Second.
Which trip was it again?
It's a potential junior high wrestling trip that Mr. Lingenfelter put in anticipation of somebody going to state in March.
And for the record, we did have people go to state last year, so this is a good possibility. Are there questions about this? All right, Allison?
Rodriguez? Aye. Sherby?
Yeah.
Walters?
Aye.
Surratt?
Aye.
Hannigan?
Yes.
Lyon?
Yes.
Phelps?
Aye.
All right, next do I have a motion to consider approval of the bid for a 2020 cargo van.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Ham?
So in front of you is a request to approve the purchase of a 2024 cargo van for our maintenance department. It's replacing a 2002 van that has substantial miles, and we have tried to make a concerted effort over the last couple of years to make capital replacement purchases for outdated and aging equipment. And so this is recommendation from our maintenance director for this year's purchase is to replace our 2002 van.
So is it that bad? It's only worth $250?
That's
what I was just thinking.
That is all that YEM gave us on the bid. So we went through a bid process. And the other bidders gave us $500, but YEM gave us $250. So, but it still ended up as low bid.
Are you offering more?
Well, you know you can go to Yems and offer $260 for it.
Why give it to them? Why give it to them? Why don't we keep
Most
it?
of the time, the bid is contingent upon that. You can't change the terms of the bid.
That
We'd have to
we have
license
to,
another vehicle.
and we have to keep insurance on it.
These are all gasoline or diesel?
Gasoline.
Or gasoline?
Yeah.
Any other questions? Allison?
Sherby?
Aye.
Walters? Surratt?
Aye.
Hannigan?
Yes.
Lyon?
Yes.
Phelps?
Aye.
Rodriguez?
Aye.
Can you put a new logo on them instead of that ugly thing they have?
Yeah, that would be great.
Pretty good idea.
Mrs. Pickrell.
Yeah,
I'll get it.
I'll get the logo and print it up.
No, really.
No, I know, I love that logo. That would be great.
All right, next up, the transportation transition discussion. Mrs. Ham.
That's it. Okay.
Unless you want me to do it.
No, I can do it. So we wanted to discuss tonight with the board a transition we would like to make. Currently, we employ 3 drivers with the district that run day routes. For a variety of reasons, we feel at this time it would be best if we transition those routes to First Student. We have some out-of-town routes that we will consolidate potentially with Knoxville. Mrs. Earp is in, did Mrs. Earp leave? She left, okay. Mrs. Earp is in conversations with Knoxville to consolidate some of those routes. Dr. Mashad believes that potentially next year we won't even need a Kiefer route. That's still yet to be determined. So hopefully we'll be eliminating a special ed bus going over to Peoria every day. So we would like to make this transition on January 1st. We have 3 drivers with the district that we are able to offer alternative employment to. It's still part of the same bargaining unit. They're part of the SEIU, Custodial Maintenance and Transportation Unit. We have 1 custodian that will be vacating his position next week, and so one of the drivers would have an opportunity to bid on that position. We have another custodian retiring in February, so a position will be available there. And then we literally have subs every single day in our custodial staff. So we believe the 3rd person we could use as a permanent sub until a permanent position opened up. So we're offering positions to these people. It's the same rate of pay. And so they're able to stay with the district, but we will be we're recommending turning those services over to First Student on January 1st.
Will First Student be able to find drivers for them?
Yes, we actually had a meeting with the regional manager last week.
Friday. What's that do with cost? First Student isn't gonna do anything, so what? So we're still gonna employ those drivers, then we gotta pay First Student. What's that differential there?
Well, we're employing them, but those are open custodial positions and things that so we're not adding custodial positions, we're slotting them into open positions basically we have, or using them as subs, and we would be paying for a sub anyways. So there's no additional cost for that. Plus there's just some inefficiencies in time with our current system. So there are, the routes change frequently, and there's oftentimes a large amount of downtime. So that we're paying people to not drive and wait for additional assignments. So after doing some investigation and some cost analysis, we believe that it's a much better option to turn it over to First Student, who can combine it with some other things that they're doing.
What is your plan for the buses then?
So our bus lease is up on June 30th of this year. We'll continue to use those buses for evening activities and for sports. And our current drivers will still be able to bid on those assignments. And we have a couple other drivers that aren't First Student drivers that do athletic trips for us. So we'll continue to use those until the leases are up and we turn those buses back in.
Just this June they go back.
Yeah, they go back in June, and First Student may also then sublease those on certain occasions from us. So we feel they'll be used until the lease expires in June.
So in our board packet, there was a job app or description for bus driver. So what's going on there? If you're just asking us to transition away, and now
Well, to do the alternative would be to presume that you aren't directing our work. So it was on the schedule of things to get done. If we didn't put it on there, then we would be circumventing the board process. If you said, this is a terrible idea, keep the bus drivers, well, then we need to keep that on the regular.
So, because we're updating all of our job descriptions on a schedule this year.
So yes, that does look a little funny. I completely understand, but we did not feel it would be appropriate to presume the board's direction until we heard the board's direction. So we kept it on.
So there won't be any additional expense for First Student to cover those 3 buses?
Well, we'll have to pay them more, but we won't have to pay those 3 people that were bus drivers anymore because we'll be paying them for open custodial.
You didn't lose any, we still have expense on those people, that's what I'm saying.
Right.
Whether you're still employing them, so you're still paying them.
Right.
So we're gonna go up in expense.
Well, but these are positions in custodial that we were going to be filling.
We were going to have to hire for those positions.
So our FTE number doesn't go up.
Right.
But what I'm asking, are we gonna have a net increase in cost by what we just did?
No, because you're talking about 2 different pools of money. So we are not adding custodial positions. We're simply taking those drivers, we're slotting those into available custodial positions.
So you're telling me that First Student is gonna off what we would have if things stay status quo, we're not gonna raise our expense by what First Student's gonna charge us.
First Student is going to bill us for those other 3 routes.
Okay.
They are.
Yes.
And it may not, that's what's tricky about this, is because they're not really 3 full routes. And they fluctuate during the year. So First Student will only bill us for what they drive. So we've employed 3 people and not always had work for 3 people. So they'll be much more responsive to the change in our scheduling than we are. And that's why there were large gaps of time where we couldn't always schedule our employees. So we had certain employees that at certain times had 5 hours in their day where they were not working, yet we were paying them.
So we believe that there may be some efficiencies in the transportation part that we can rightfully stand here today and tell you it's going to save money. We believe it will. But I don't like to base things on that, so we just assume say, no, we don't believe it will cost any more. There may be a little bit of an increase on the custodial for the short term because we would be having a full-time person in a sub capacity until a position opened up. But we felt like these 3 employees didn't really deserve to lose their job, and we know we have work for them to do every day, and so we don't feel like it's really, in broad strokes, we feel it's more of a cost-neutral proposition than anything at this point.
And after the lease expires in June, we'll no longer have the lease on the buses. We'll save on our insurance, licensing, all of that. We also have to spend a substantial amount of money on drug testing to meet IDOT requirements, so all of that goes away when we get out of the transportation business, in essence.
And we're not paying subs to be custodians.
Well,
because we'll fill those spots, correct?
So it depends. So the one person that may be the
At least on
floater,
the one time.
right? So as long as there's only one sub needed for the day, then that person will fill that. But if there's 2 or 3 that call in, then we'll still utilize our sub list for those.
Are the 3 drivers aware of this discussion?
They are.
Yes. Are they all interested in taking a custodial position?
One is definitely for sure, and the other 2 have not given us an answer. We actually met with them and their union representation last week, along with the UNISERV director, Karen Kleinhans with SEIU. She came up from Springfield and sat down and met with all of us. So it was Wednesday with those drivers, and then we confirmed everything with First Student on Friday.
So.
And we told everyone that this was contingent upon direction from the board, but that this was going to be our recommendation and our timeline.
Right. So, did anybody hear anything tonight that would tell them that we shouldn't at least put something on the agenda for next month to basically eliminate those routes? We'd have to figure out through the thing lives here how we would word that. But does anybody have a problem with that?
I'm glad to be out of the bus business.
We'll move forward then with our plan. Thank you.
All right, moving on to personnel. Do I have a motion to consider approval of the job descriptions minus, or do we still approve? Okay. Consider approval of the job descriptions.
Second.
Any questions about those?
Could you explain the coordinator of emergent programs?
I will ask Tiffany to do that, as she's been much more heavily involved in this than I.
It's a requirement that if you have 200 EL students or more, you're required to.
EL's English language.
English language learner. They're actually changing to EB, emergent bilingual, and they've changed their department to multilingual services. So I anticipate an MB coming instead of an EB here within the next few months. I know.
There's a JP, John Pratt.
Okay.
And actually, this information is a result of Senor Pratt's and Mr. Rasso attending their director's meeting. We've actually been at the threshold and over the 200 number requirement when we actually look at our records. And as requirements state, we have to have a coordinator. And if you look at that job description, those are the requirements directly from the State Board of Ed that this person must hold in order to have this position.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I feel like this will also provide some support to all of the work that John already does. Countless of hours.
Pretty sure he doesn't sleep.
As we were on break in the hallway and I heard him speaking, on the phone in French, no doubt, to a parent about something happening in school tomorrow. Any other questions regarding job descriptions? Allison?
Walters?
Aye.
Surratt?
Aye.
Hannigan?
Yeah.
Lyon?
Yes.
Phelps?
Aye.
Rodriguez? Sharpie?
All right, do I have a motion to consider approval of the personnel report?
Second.
Any questions? Allison?
Surratt?
Aye.
Hannigan?
Yes.
Lyon?
Yes.
Phelps?
Aye.
Rodriguez? Sharpie?
Aye.
Walters?
Aye.
And next, a grievance update, Dr. Asplund.
Thank you, I'll keep this brief. We are still slated for arbitration on December 16th for yet to be resolved grievance from last year. And so that, at this point in time, is still scheduled to happen on the 16th of December. I am meeting with the GEA representatives tomorrow to discuss any other outstanding issues that are out there. I don't have any other grievances right now. One of our big topics of discussion for tomorrow may be negotiations, since our contract is up at the end of the year. And so we need to start moving in that direction pretty quickly.
Yes, we'd like to do it as early as possible. I mean, if we're gonna be up for negotiation for next, if we have, the contract is due June 30th, right?
June 30th.
June 30th, I hope we can meet as early as next as January. We're gonna be doing going that direction.
The sooner the better would be great. Yes, absolutely.
A lot of discussion.
Yes, thank you.
2 a.m. meetings.
I was just wondering why Member Sharpie and Member Lyon commented on that. They are the negotiation. They're on the negotiation team. That's why they.
I think we're both ready.
Wonderful. I will express that to them tomorrow.
Thank you.
Wonderful. All right, next, do I have a motion to consider approval of non-disciplinary unpaid leave for employee number 55240?
Second.
Questions about this? Allison?
Hannigan?
Yes.
Lyon? Phelps?
Aye.
Rodriguez? Sharpie?
Yes.
Walters?
Aye.
Surratt?
Aye. And a report on FOIA request, Dr. Asplund.
Thank you. We had two in this last month. We had one that was from New York University about initial charter school applications. We were able to answer back. We didn't have any. And the other was from the Register Mail for the settlement agreement that the board voted on last month regarding a former employee. That was it.
Thank you. All right, now we've reached, as I say every month, everyone's favorite part of the evening. Comments by the Board of Education. And I say it's the favorite, not because you want to hear more from us, but because it signals the end of the meeting. Member Walters.
I'm first?
No, I said Member Walters.
Go ahead. Board Member Huntington. Thank you, everybody, for coming and listening. I know it's a long meeting. Again, just to echo, what I said before, as a parent of students who will also, with the school closing, be changing locations from their friends and things, I have my concerns. I absolutely do. But as a board member, my task is to look at the big picture, which I am doing. So, I echo a lot of the concerns that the community does as well. But we're doing the best that we can.
Member Rodriguez.
I will basically say the same thing. I am a parent and my child will also be going to a different school next year. So I have all of the same feelings that everybody else has. I appreciate you guys coming to voice your concerns, because the concerns that social media puts out isn't always so nice. And to see people to come here and to tell us what they have to say, we appreciate that a lot more than what we see online. This is an easy decision. It's not something that we want to do, but it's something that we have to do. So thank you for coming here and voicing your concerns, and we are doing the best that we can do.
Member Sharpie.
Yeah, concerning the boundary discussion, we knew it was coming. When we started this whole process of with our new buildings and whatnot. And I know change is difficult. It's going to be hard for the staff and for the students and families. But I do believe that in the end, people are going to be far more satisfied with the schools that their children will be going to. We have a lot of really good teachers in all the schools, and no one is going to be shortchanged in their education by transferring from one school to another. But we will be ensuring that the facilities are outstanding and all.
Member Huntington.
Well, my only comment is the fact that if it is an unfair distribution of students, that can be changed. And I think the board will be responsive to what the public is the input that the public will be giving us. And if it is a disaster, we will change it.
Member Phelps.
I too have a daughter that will not go to where Sissy went to school. And so we've had some discussions, and I told her that it wasn't easy, and I applaud you folks for speaking up. Change isn't easy in today's society, but everything we're doing is the best info that we have and the best that we can do. And I can tell you these new facilities are going to be impressive. I wish I'd have had some of this when I was coming to school. So none of your comments are taken lightly. We get it, but to echo what's already been said, we're doing the best that we can do, and in the end, I think we'll look back on it and smile.
Member Lyon.
I'm going to speak other points if I may. 2 weeks ago, I went to the high school for the high school play. I thought it went very nicely. Thank you to the high school for performing it. I look forward to a day when they have a better facility in which to perform now. And that's part of our charge moving forward. The other piece, I think we'd be cognizant that, the closing of schools, we've got rid of all the schools named for women, with Gale and Nielsen, and only left with schools named for men. I don't know what we do about that. We're not going to change names probably, but I think it's something to be aware of. I mean, joins Rosehoven Welch and Nellie Swanson and that are closed schools. And I don't think it was done intentionally, but we should honor the women in our community in some way. Yeah, I'm not sure how.
I'm glad that you brought that up. It's a good point. I'm just going to say that I agree with everything. I'm often accused of being extremely passionate at this table. And I am. This work is not easy. The decisions that we make are not done so lightly. And we are acutely aware of the impact that it has on people. And saying this, being a board member that's being seated at this table the longest, and all of the different changes that I have been a part of and helped usher in and debated about, it hasn't been easy, but I do agree that with my fellow board members that we are doing the best that we can and that we are really trying to be very intentional. It is not easy to come up here and say and speak in front of us. It rarely happens. There's a lot of Facebook commentary, so I know that it was hard, and I know that it may feel like you're walking out of here without the answers that you feel like you wanted. But I appreciate the fact that you showed up. And Elizabeth, I appreciate the fact that you continue to show up, because I see your face out there all of the time. So I appreciate the fact that you're here. Because you could just be sitting at home commenting. So, thank you. Future agenda items?
I'd like to have a report at some point about how the instructional coaches are working out.
Yeah, at the end of the first semester we will.
Okay. Next month's meeting is scheduled for December 9th at 7 o'clock. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.